Chapter 2258. Yi Zhao clenched his fists tightly. Mu Dongyu continued. Pure bloodline. This is the same as the ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. In time, she will definitely be able to break through the 9th meridian. Yi Zhao, if you can persuade her to surrender, I promise that your Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's past crimes will be forgiven. Even if it's not for yourself, you have to think about your clansmen, right? How long do you think you can seal them in the Phoenix God Mountain? The bloodline power in your body is almost depleted. After a while, the barrier will collapse on its own without us doing anything. At that time, won't the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan still be in trouble? Mu Dongyu stared at Yi Zhao. After a long time, Yi Zhao finally sneered. His voice was cold and sarcastic. When has the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan ever committed any crimes? You know best in your hearts who is in the wrong. Mu Dongyu's face darkened. He warned in a deep voice. Yi Zhao. However, Yi Zhao didn't seem to hear the anger and warning in his words. Or perhaps, he didn't care at all. The choice made by our ancestor is also the choice made by our entire clan. Mu Dongyu, there are some things that you can do that our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan will never do. I advise you to save your energy. Don't waste your breath on this useless nonsense. No matter how hard you try, no matter how many times you repeat it, my answer will never change. Any more words will only make me feel that you are more ridiculous. Mu Dongyu's expression was cold as he waved his hand. Whoosh, the black chains wrapped around Yi Zhao began to tremble violently, emitting ice-cold clanging sounds. Yi Zhao's body shuddered. He was trembling slightly due to the intense pain. A stream of faint reddish-gold blood slowly flowed out from the wound on his wrist and spread along the chain. The thick smell of blood gradually spread out. The surrounding golden Tianlei seemed to have sensed something and became restless. Mu Dongyu snorted, and they gradually calmed down. Then, a ball of blood the size of a longan gradually condensed in front of Mu Dongyu. Within the ball of blood, there was a wisp of pure gold that flickered with a faint light. Mu Dongyu glanced at it and frowned. Although Yi Zhao was the clan leader and had opened his 7th meridian, he had been trapped here for so long that no matter how much bloodline power he had, there would come a time when he would be exhausted. Compared to the initial situation, the bloodline power in this blood mass was much more diluted. It was not even 1/5 of the original. Yi Zhao let out a soft chuckle. If you really have the ability, just kill me. Stubborn. Gritting her teeth, Mu Dongyu put away the ball of blood and turned to leave. This Yi Zhao was indeed a tough nut to crack. It had been so long, but they still couldn't persuade him. They didn't even show any signs of relenting. As for Yi Gong, although he was obedient, he was a traitor and couldn't be put in an important position. If Yi Gong had opened his 7th meridian, he could be considered. Unfortunately, Mu Dongyu walked forward. Wherever he passed, the surrounding Tianlei quickly made way. After a while, he came to a certain place and suddenly stopped. He turned his head to look. A man was standing not far away, holding a hammer in his hand and knocking on a reef from time to time. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Mu Dongyu was already in a bad mood. Hearing this sound, she became even more irritated. Who is it? She shouted in a deep voice. Mitsui was originally focused on investigating the situation inside the reef and didn't notice someone approaching. Hearing the sound, he suddenly woke up and looked back. You are. Mitsui's eyes quickly scanned the other party and suddenly understood. The 4th divine envoy? Mu Dongyu frowned. Who are you? What are you doing here? Mitsui cupped his fists. I'm Mitsui. I'm here today to use the power of Tianlei here to temper my divine body. Mu Dongyu stared at him suspiciously. His appearance just now was indeed a little strange. Mitsui looked up and asked tentatively. May I ask, fourth divine envoy, can I not come here? He had already heard from his master that the depths of the lightning pool was a forbidden area and was not to be casually approached. Therefore, he only stayed at the edge of the pool. There shouldn't be anything wrong with that, right? Mu Dongyu didn't say anything. She looked at him coldly. Or, did I do something wrong just now? Although Mitsui was usually bold and boorish, he was very cautious. Otherwise, Tsun-Yi wouldn't have specially chosen him to stay in the mystic forest. After a moment of silence, Mu Dongyu said, "It's nothing." Actually, many people entered the lightning pool. There were all kinds of people. It wasn't that he hadn't seen them before. What Mitsui had done was nothing compared to what many people had done. It was just that he happened to be in a bad mood. Seeing Mitsui's serious and honest expression, the doubts in Mu Dongyu's heart gradually disappeared. She moved and went into the distance. Mitsui watched her leave until she was out of sight. Then, he slowly let out a sigh. Soon after, he turned back to look at the rugged reefs with some doubt. TSK. This fourth divine envoy doesn't seem to know the secret here. Didn't he say that he was in charge of the lightning pool? He didn't even know this? Mitsui scratched his head. He vaguely felt that something was wrong. On the other side, little Hachi was fiddling with medicine in her room. A rich medicinal fragrance wafted out of the room, almost filling the entire courtyard. Hua Shuangshuang and Tsun-Yi were sitting opposite each other in the courtyard. Noticing the commotion, Hua Shuangshuang looked in that direction strangely. "Big brother, what's wrong with little Hachi? Why is she so diligent in her cultivation these days?" Ever since her master left, she had been hugging countless medicinal herbs and plunging into her room. She hadn't come out until now. With little Hachi's personality, this was really strange. Tsun-Yi's expression was indifferent. He didn't even lift his eyelids. Master has already broken through to senior doctor, but she's still a senior doctor. It doesn't sound good if word gets out. Little Hachi usually seemed lively, but when it came to important matters, she was still clear-headed. Now that she was about to be left far behind, she naturally worked hard. Hua Shuangshuang immediately understood. No wonder. Suddenly, the cry of a magical beast came from afar. Hua Shuangshuang looked up and saw a golden-winged crow-bone beast flying over. It looked like an eagle or a vulture. Its entire body was black, except for a pair of dark golden wings. Under the sunlight, they shone faintly. Hua Shuangshuang focused her eyes and saw that there was a tear on its wing. Blood was flowing out, and even the white bone could be seen. Its eyes were filled with deep fear. Behind it, a half-folded condor was rapidly approaching. Chapter 2259. From the looks of it, the two divine beasts had just engaged in a fierce battle. The golden-winged raven-bone beast was no match for it and fled. However, the half-folded divine vulture, which had the upper hand, refused to let it go and chased after it. The two divine beasts were actually of the same level. But for some reason, the half-folded divine vulture was exceptionally ferocious and emitted a dense, cold aura. Its indifferent and ferocious eyes flickered with a bloodthirsty light, as well as a hint of mockery. Its speed was sometimes fast and sometimes slow. Every time the golden-winged raven-bone beast felt that it was about to successfully escape, it would suddenly speed up, but when it was about to catch up, it would slow down again. There were many times when the golden-winged raven-bone beast wanted to give up, but the other party would give it a glimmer of hope, causing it to flee with all its might. But it was also very clear that it couldn't escape the other party's pursuit. After running for so long, it had always been within the other party's hunting range. This caused the golden-winged raven-bone beast's mental state to become tense and on the verge of collapse. Seeing this scene, Hua Shuangshuang frowned and a trace of disgust flashed across her face. The half-folded divine vulture is doing this on purpose. The weak are prey to the strong. This was a principle that everyone understood. Among the magical beasts, this was even more vividly reflected. However, the half-folded divine vulture was toying with an opponent that had already been defeated by its claws. It was truly vile. He stood up, curled 2 fingers on his right hand, placed them in his mouth, and blew a whistle. Hearing this melodious and resonant whistle, the golden-winged raven-bone beast subconsciously looked over. Then, without any hesitation, it flew straight towards Hua Shuangshuang. Although it was currently injured, it had already been forced to the brink of collapse by the half-folded divine vulture. At this moment, it was using all of its remaining strength. There was even a thin layer of black flames burning on the dark golden wings. Hua Shuangshuang raised her arm, and the golden-winged raven-bone beast fell head-first towards her. Screech! It let out a low, mournful cry. Its aura was already extremely weak, and it relied on its last bit of willpower to grab onto Hua Shuangshuang's arm. Hua Shuangshuang lowered her eyes and glanced at it, her brows furrowed even more tightly. She took out a pill with her other hand and fed it. Without even looking at it, the golden-winged raven-bone beast directly swallowed it. If anyone else saw this scene, they would definitely feel extremely shocked. Demonic beasts were vigilant by nature and were naturally hostile to humans. This was especially true for divine beasts, who were alert. They would not easily trust humans. However, at this moment, this golden-winged crow-bone beast directly flew over to Hua Shuangshuang's side, and without the slightest hesitation, ate the food he gave it. It didn't seem to be worried that Hua Shuangshuang would take the opportunity to harm it. Instead, it trusted her with its life. This was truly strange. A dark and cold murderous intent flashed across the eyes of the half-broken Shen vulture when it saw this. Just as it was about to continue forward, Sun Yi suddenly looked up. His face was calm, and his narrow and indifferent eyes were as deep as the sea, making him unfathomable. An indescribable invisible pressure surged out of his body. The half-broken god vulture finally stopped when it noticed danger, and then a strand of deep fear and terror had inexplicably surged from the bottom of its heart. This place must not be approached. However, it was really unwilling to give up on the food that was already in its mouth. In order to take down this golden-winged skeletal beast, it had spent a great deal of effort. But now, it was all for naught. It paced back and forth outside the courtyard, unwilling to approach, but also unwilling to leave. Hua Shuangshuang glanced at the golden-winged crow-bone beast lying on his arm. When he sensed that its aura was gradually stabilizing, his expression relaxed slightly. Then, he looked at Sun Yi. "Big brother, I really don't like this half-broken god vulture," Sun Yi said indifferently. "This is something from Jun Jiuqing. It's normal that you don't like it." Hua Shuangshuang was stunned. He turned around to take a look, and only then did he understand. "I see. I knew there were many different types of energy mixed within its body." He had heard of Jun Jiuqing's name before. This person didn't have a contract with any magical beasts, but he kept many of them by his side. Moreover, he liked to let them fight and kill each other. Only the strongest one would become his favorite. However, this was usually a short period of time. Once a better one appeared, he would immediately switch to another. The reason why this half-broken god vulture's energy was mixed was because it had devoured too many different types of magical beasts. Of course, there might also be humans among them. "Wait, why is Jun Jiuqing's divine beast here?" Sun Yi's expression didn't change. "Of course, it's because he's here too." "He's here." Hua Shuangshuang was about to say something when he suddenly saw a figure slowly walking toward them. "I was wondering why you didn't come back after so long." "So you came here?" A lazy and evil voice sounded. It was Jun Jiuqing. Hearing this voice, the half-broken god vulture's eyes suddenly flashed with deep fear. It had been with Jun Jiuqing for a long time, so it could naturally hear the dense impatience and annoyance in his voice. It folded its wings and lowered its head slightly. Jun Jiuqing didn't even look at it. Instead, his eyes fell on Sun Yi. Their eyes met. At this moment, even the surrounding air seemed to have frozen. But after a while, Jun Jiuqing shifted his gaze and looked at Hua Shuangshuang and the golden-winged crow-bone beast on his arm. This was originally a little toy sent by the second divine envoy, but it seems that you are very interested in it. Since that's the case, I'll give it to you as a gift. Hua Shuangshuang frowned. Why did Jun Jiuqing's words sound like he had a close relationship with the second divine envoy? Based on her previous experience, these divine envoys were all extremely arrogant. But now, they were treating Jun Jiuqing so politely. A divine beast was given away just like that? Who didn't know that this was to be fed to his half-broken god vulture? Even if the golden-winged crow-bone beast couldn't be compared to the two ancient divine beasts, it was still a respectable existence among the divine beasts. She really didn't know what the second divine envoy was thinking. Oh right, I heard that she went back. Jun Jiuqing sighed softly as his slender fingers brushed past his eyebrows. Seems like she went back to invite the artifact refining saint over? Probably to enter the palace of the illusory god. Actually, I said before that I could bring her in, but unfortunately, she wasn't willing. She just had to go through so much trouble. Hua Shuangshuang snorted. What does what my master wants to do have to do with you? Patriarch Yi, you should focus more on yourself. Jun Jiuqing's gaze turned even colder, but his lips still held a smile and his sword-like eyebrows raised slightly. I just think that she's too stupid to seek something far away. Family Yi. Sun Yi suddenly stood up. Chapter 2260. The smile on Jun Jiuqing's face finally faded. He stared at Sun Yi for a while, then turned to leave without saying anything. The half-folded divine vulture quickly followed. Seeing their figures gradually disappear into the distance, Hua Shuangshuang frowned and looked at Sun Yi. Big brother, who exactly is that Jun Jiuqing? He seems to be quite familiar with these divine envoys. This kind of treatment was much better than what they had received. Sun Yi said, of course it's Family Yi's head. Hua Shuangshuang suddenly understood something. You mean, Family Yi, boom. A powerful energy wave suddenly came from the room. The two of them turned to look. Bang! The door was violently opened by this shocking force, and a thick cloud of white smoke spread out from inside. Immediately after, little Hachi hurriedly ran out. Cough cough, cough, cough cough. As little Hachi ran, she kept waving her hands, trying to disperse the smoke. When she finally reached the center of the courtyard, she was finally able to catch her breath. That scared me to death. Little Hachi supported herself on the stone table with one hand and patted her chest with the other. Little Hachi, what's wrong? Hua Shuangshuang had just taken a step forward when little Hachi happened to raise her head, and his heart jumped in fright. For some reason, little Hachi's face was smeared with several streaks of black ash. Her eyes were filled with tears from the smoke, and she looked extremely pathetic. Hua Shuangshuang's mouth twitched. Little Hachi, what did you do? Are you going to tear down the room? Little Hachi shook her head pitifully. What? I just wanted to see if I could refine a Supreme Doctor level pill, and I accidentally ended up like this, Hua Shuangshuang sighed. You can't rush this kind of thing. You've always been very talented. Take it slow, and you'll succeed, little Hachi shook her head. Second brother, you misunderstood. I've already refined it. As she spoke, she took out a tattered box. It's just that the medicinal pill contained too much power. My medicinal cauldron couldn't withstand it and exploded just like that. Even this box was blown apart. Her heart ached. This is a jade box that I chose after looking at it for a full 6 hours. It was originally used to store the first senior doctor level pill that I refined. Who knew that something like this would happen? Heavens knew that when that medicinal cauldron exploded, her little heart was really thumping wildly. Hua Shuangshuang opened her eyes wide. She looked at the jade box and didn't say anything for a long time. Yi, on the other hand, reached out to take the item and opened it for a look. Although the jade box was shattered, the medicinal pills inside were still in good condition. White and green intertwined. Although the colors were a little mixed, the power was still considered pure. Most importantly, this was indeed a senior doctor level pill. This also meant that little Hachi had officially broken through to Supreme Doctor. Just put up with it. Yi took a few glances and returned the item to little Hachi. I'll get you a better medicinal cauldron later. There won't be a next time. Hua Shuangxuang looked at him as if she was looking at a pervert. Little Hachi had broken through to Supreme Doctor so quickly. If this was outside, who knew how many people would be envious of her? Why did it become putting up with it when it came to Big Brother? Little Hachi seemed to have already expected his answer. She weakly exhaled and put the jade box away. I know. But Big Brother, it won't be too late to say these words after I go to sleep. In order to refine this pill, she hadn't slept for several days and nights. Now that she had finally succeeded, she only wanted to take a comfortable bath and sleep for 3 days and 3 nights, all right? With that, she turned around and walked away. Hua Shuangxuang looked at her sympathetically. Do you plan to raise this golden-winged crow-bone beast yourself or send it back? Yi asked. Hua Shuangxuang returned to her senses and looked down. The golden-winged crow-bone beast seemed to be afraid of being abandoned. Its body trembled slightly. Hua Shuangxuang sighed. I'll raise it. On the other side, Jun Jiuqing had just passed through the gate of the Illusion God Palace when he stopped. The half-folded divine vulture that had been following him also stopped. Jun Jiuqing said. Come here. The half-folded divine vulture obeyed and arrived in front of him. Sensing the cold aura emanating from Jun Jiuqing's body, a deep sense of fear welled up in its heart. It's just a golden-winged crow-bone beast, yet you wasted so much time. There was no emotion in his voice, only a bone-chilling coldness. An extreme sense of danger welled up in its heart. The half-folded divine vulture's eyes suddenly widened. It spread its wings and turned around to flee. However, before it could move, a silver streak of light flew out, bang. Its head instantly exploded. A cluster of flames ignited and quickly swallowed the corpse. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. The half-folded divine vulture died just like that. Not even its bones remained. It was just a bit playful. You killed it so straightforwardly. Aren't you a bit too heartless? A gentle male voice sounded. Jun Jiuqing looked up. The person who came was a young man in his 20s. It's just a half-folded divine vulture. What's there to pity? Jun Jiuqing laughed. It's not a crimson gold heavenly phoenix or a great phoenix dragon. In my opinion, the second divine envoy doesn't need to care. Yu Qian raised an eyebrow. You can't say that. The divine beasts of the Illusion God Palace are all extremely precious. It's naturally a pity that it died just like that. Jun Jiuqing's lips curled slightly. He didn't think much of it. If Yu Qian really cared, he wouldn't have reacted like this. Yu Qian said. I'm here to ask you something. Jun Jiuqing nodded. Second divine envoy, please speak. Yu Qian took a step forward. I heard that Shengguanyu has 2 contracted divine beasts. One is the 3-eyed divine eagle, and the other is the current young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Jun Jiuqing's eyebrows moved slightly. Why are you asking this, second divine envoy? You just have to say yes or no. Yu Qian smiled faintly. Elsewhere in the Illusion God Palace, Jin Yunlai was organizing the roster in his room when he suddenly heard footsteps. He looked up and saw that it was Xu Jing. He frowned slightly. Ever since Xu Jing was reprimanded in public, she hadn't shown her face much. Even when she returned to the Illusion God Palace, she always came and went in a hurry. Why are you here? He closed the roster and put away the crimson gold feather in his hand. Xu Jing's eyes swept across the roster and didn't stop. I'm here this time because I have something to ask. What is it? Xu Jing paused. She looked hesitant. After a while, she took a few steps forward and stood in front of Jin Yunlai. She asked softly, have you seen the first divine envoy recently? Jin Yunlai frowned. You went to see him? Xu Jing bit her lip. He refused to see me. Chapter 2261. Jin Yunlai leaned back in her chair. Isn't this normal? Everyone would think so. Why are you looking for him at this time? Of course, he won't meet you. Xu Jing frowned. Of course, I know that. However, I suddenly remembered something. The first oracle hasn't shown up for several years. All this time, many of the affairs in the illusory god palace have been handled by the second oracle. Don't you think this is a bit strange? Jin Yunlai frowned. What's so strange about this? The first oracle's most important duty is always to be loyal to the illusory god palace. Isn't it normal to leave those messy little things to the subordinates to handle? Do you think everyone is like you, wanting to control all the power in their own hands? These words were very harsh, and Xu Jing's face became very ugly. However, Jin Yunlai's status was higher than hers, and she was telling the truth. She was in no position to refute. She took a deep breath and suppressed her anger. It's normal, but now that the divine gate has opened, the first oracle hasn't appeared. This doesn't make sense. She raised her chin. I just want to ask you. Have you sent this list to the first oracle? Jin Yunlai narrowed her eyes. The first oracle has already said that these matters are left to the second oracle. He doesn't care about other things and doesn't care too much. However, this list is of great importance, and he doesn't even look at it? He didn't even ask about it once. The room fell into a short silence. Jin Yunlai slowly sat up straight. What are you trying to say? Xu Jing said, it's not that I want to say anything. I just feel that this matter is strange. In addition, some time ago, the sixth oracle returned. I heard that his physical body was completely destroyed, and even his divine body fell along with it. He is now in seclusion to recover. He is very scheming. Who could have caused him to suffer such a big loss? Jin Yunlai didn't say anything. The relationship between the oracles of the illusory god palace wasn't very close. Most of the time, they just performed their own duties. Sometimes, they might not even see each other once in a few years. He had been in contact with Xu Jing for a long time. Xu Jing lowered his voice, and there seemed to be a light flickering in his eyes. I know that the sixth divine emissary was ordered to leave, and this time, he returned with permission. However, according to the rumors, the first divine envoy actually left the illusory god palace a few years ago and only returned recently. Rumors? Jin Yunlai sneered. There's no evidence for this kind of thing, so it's best not to talk about it. Moreover, this matter was related to the first oracle, so he had to be careful with his words and actions. Xu Jing, don't blame me for not reminding you. Don't stretch your hand so far. Otherwise, you won't even know how you died. Xu Jing was not reconciled. But, if you really want to know, why don't you ask the first oracle again? This way, the truth would be revealed. What other rumor could be more credible than the explanation of the person involved? Or, you can go and consult the second divine emissary. In short, I won't stop you. But he wouldn't get involved. Xu Jing gritted his teeth when he saw his firm attitude. Roar! Suddenly, a roar came from outside the door. The two of them were shocked and turned their heads to look. Jin Yunlai got up, walked over, and opened the window. A muscular white lion was leaping over. Its ice-blue eyes were looking straight at them. They were cold, indifferent, and extremely sharp. When it saw the two of them, it licked its paws, and a trace of mockery flashed in its eyes. However, when the two people in the room saw it, they were both shocked and looked at each other. Why did the Emperor's demonic beast suddenly come here? Then what they said just now, Xu Jing clenched his fists nervously, and his lips turned pale. This white lion rarely came here. Why did it suddenly appear today? She opened her mouth and was about to explain. Roar. Before she could say anything, the white lion had already retracted its gaze, turned around, and leaped away quickly. Its speed was extremely fast, and it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Jin Yunlai suddenly thought of something and turned around. Where did it come from just now? Xu Jing was stunned. I didn't notice. What's wrong? Jin Yunlai slowly clenched his fists. If I'm not wrong, it seems to have come from the direction of the first oracle's residence. How is that possible? Xu Jing instinctively retorted. It's not easy to get close to the first oracle's residence. Moreover, it hasn't opened its door for several years. Even I was stopped outside previously. How could it have come from there? Jin Yunlai lowered his eyes slightly. This was his territory. He wouldn't be wrong. There was only the first oracle in that direction. It must have come from there. But why did it go there? Maybe I was wrong. Jin Yunlai closed the window. You'd better go back. Let's forget about the first oracle. If you really want to know, you know who to ask. With that, he sat back in his seat and made a gesture of sending him off. Xu Jing bit his lip and finally left. At this moment, Chu Luyue and the others had arrived at the sea again. This time, there were more people with them. In addition to Su Li and Rong Xiu, who they had initially planned to invite, there were also Mu Hongyu, Jian Fengqi, and Yan Qing. Even Tang Ku, who had said that she had something to do at the beginning, had come along. When they arrived, there were many more people standing on the shore than when Chu Luyue left. Ever since the Divine Gate opened, the experts in the Divine Ruins world had come here. When Chu Luyue arrived with Sun Yi and the others, they were the first batch. And now, with the passage of time, more and more people naturally came. Because of the previous experience, Chu Luyue and the others went much more smoothly this time. Other than Mu Hongyu, Jian Fengqi, and Su Li, who were still exalted gods, the others were already venerable gods. And Su Li herself was a weapon-refining saint. If she wanted to pass through this sea, she had plenty of divine artifacts. Mu Hongyu was even more so. She could even pass through the sky canopy freely, so this was naturally not a problem. So, in the end, the only one left was Jian Fengqi. Looking at the rolling waves in front of him, he grabbed Mu Hongyu's wrist without hesitation. Mu Hongyu looked up at him. Jian Fengqi coughed. Take me there, and I'll return the contract to you. Mu Hongyu was still a little hesitant at first, but when she heard this, she immediately agreed without hesitation. Deal. Chu Luyue looked at him suspiciously. Based on her understanding of Jian Fengqi, he didn't seem like a straightforward person. Suddenly, a warm and strong hand reached over and held her hand. Let's go. Rong Xiu looked up at the silver bridge calmly and raised his eyebrows slightly. I hope everything goes well. Digression, it was about 7 o'clock. Chapter 2262. Sensing the movement of the Divine Gate, Jin Yunlai stood up and walked outside. However, as soon as he reached the door, he felt that something was wrong. In the courtyard, the void shook. Ripples spread out, and a figure gradually appeared. Seventh Divine Envoy. Seeing who it was, Jin Yunlai was shocked. Lord Yuemo. Why are you here? This person usually followed the emperor and rarely showed himself. He also rarely came to the palace of the illusory god. Why was he so free today? Yumo's gaze fell on the register in his hand. The emperor wants to see this divine enrollment register. Jin Yunlai was shocked. Now? Umo raised his eyebrows. Why, can't I see it? Of course not. Jin Yunlai immediately denied. However, he still felt that the emperor's sudden request was quite strange. This divine enrollment register was considered an item of the palace of the illusory god. The emperor would only look at it once every 1,000 years. After thinking about it carefully, the emperor had indeed not looked at it for a long time. However, this was the first time he had asked for it when the divine enrollment register opened. However, some people have already reached the divine enrollment register. I still have to register them, 7th divine envoy. Umo interrupted him with a smile. The emperor is in such a good mood today. You should know what is more important. Jin Yunlai's heart skipped a beat. He no longer hesitated and presented the register with both hands. Lord Umo is right. The divine enrollment register is here. Please take a look. Umo raised his hand. The divine enrollment register and the reddish gold feather flew lightly and landed in his palm. 7th divine envoy, if you are really worried, I can also help you register those people at the divine enrollment register. Then, I will bring the divine enrollment register back and present it to the emperor. Jin Yunlai was a little hesitant. This. I'm afraid it will be troublesome, it's just writing a few names. What's so troublesome about it? It will be over in a while. Or does the 7th divine envoy not believe me? I don't dare. Jin Yunlai lowered his head slightly. In that case, I will leave the divine enrollment register to you for the time being. Umo revealed a satisfied look on his face. Then the 7th divine emissary should rest for the time being. After the celestial emperor has finished reading it, I will naturally send it back. Jin Yunlai responded. Umo's figure flashed and quickly disappeared from the spot. Only then did Jin Yunlai raise her head, a trace of doubt flashing through her eyes. Of all times to enter the divine book, why did it have to be now? He thought for a moment and looked in the direction of the divine gate. Naturally, he couldn't see anything clearly from here. However, he was in charge of guarding the divine gate this time, so he could sense the barrier over there. Not long after, a familiar fluctuation came from that direction. Shangguanyu? He muttered under his breath. You came back pretty quickly. She reckoned that the person with her was the weapon-refining saint she had invited earlier? From the looks of it, there seemed to be a few more. He probably brought his subordinates or someone he was familiar with. Anyway, this was not the first time she had done something like this. Jin Yunlai frowned. After a moment, she retracted her gaze, shook her head, and turned back into the house. There was nothing much to see. At the divine gate, Chu Luyue directly crossed the barrier and entered the divine gate. Rongxiu followed closely behind. Just as he approached the barrier, there was a ripple on it. Buzz, it faintly emitted a suppressive aura, blocking people outside. He stopped and withdrew his hand. Chu Luyue saw this and didn't find it strange. She explained, it's probably because you haven't been here before, so you were stopped. Later, the 7th divine envoy will come and register you. As she spoke, she turned back and glanced in the direction of the star path. Strange, Jin Yunlai used to come very quickly. Why was she nowhere to be seen this time? Rongxiu gently nodded. Then let's wait. Su Li and the others also nodded. Since they were already here, there was nothing to be anxious about. At this moment, Chu Luyue felt a fluctuation behind her. She focused her gaze. A blurry figure appeared in front of her. In the fluctuating void, a man's voice could be heard. The 7th divine envoy can't come for now. I will be responsible for your registration. When she saw the silhouette of the figure, Chu Luyue had already guessed the person's identity. Now that she heard the voice, she was even more certain. This person was the man who appeared at Herb Mountain that day. In other words, he was the person who was rumored to be by the emperor's side. Just as she was about to speak, the man had already raised his hand. Whoosh! A reddish-gold feather flew from his hand and went straight to Rong Xiu's forehead. It gently swept across his forehead. The totem of the Yuntian Tower quickly appeared. The man asked for his name and opened the barrier. Rong Xiu lifted his foot and stepped through the divine gate. Chu Luiyue blinked. That was too fast. However, Rong Xiu had a bloodline totem to begin with. It was not strange that he could enter smoothly. The people behind him followed one after another. Jian Fengqi, Mu Hongyu, and Su Li did not have a bloodline totem. Chu Luiyue originally thought that this person would make things difficult for them. However, he only sent out a few letters without saying anything and directly let them in. In less than a quarter of an hour, all of them had entered the heaven gate. Chu Luiyue felt that it was a bit strange. She looked at the man again. Unfortunately, the man's figure and appearance were blurred in a halo. She could not see clearly. Clap. The sound of the register being closed could be heard. Some of you know the rules of the illusory god palace, so I won't say anything more. Then, the man's figure quickly disappeared. Jian Fengqi looked at Chu Luiyue. This illusory god palace doesn't seem that hard to enter. Mu Hongyu stretched out her hand. Give me the contract. Chapter 2263. Jian Fengqi's peach blossom-shaped eyes sparkled. With a wave of his slender fingers, a piece of paper appeared at his fingertips. Why are you in such a hurry? I've always kept my promises. I won't go back on my words. Mu Hongyu took the piece of paper and looked at it carefully. Suddenly, she froze. There's something wrong with this contract. Why isn't there my handprint on it? At first glance, there was nothing wrong with the contract, but the most important thing was that her handprint was missing. Jian Fengqi waved his fan. Oh, this one. I copied it when I was bored. Of course, it doesn't have your handprint. Mu Hongyu. What did you say? She gritted her teeth and stared at Jian Fengqi with her almond-shaped eyes. Jian Fengqi took a step back. Ahem. I only said that I was giving you the contract, but I didn't say which one. Mu Hongyu raised her voice. Of course I want the real one. Why did he give her a fake one? Jian Fengqi looked innocent. But you didn't say so just now. Everyone, they had seen shameless people before, but it was rare to see someone this shameless. Chu Luiyue was full of admiration and emotion. After so many years, Jian Fengqi, you're still the best. He was the only one who could do something like this. Oh, no, there was someone here who could compete with him. Tang Ku. Without saying anything, she put the tombstones together. Now, the entire Peach Blossom Dock, no, the entire world of divine ruins, knew that they had been buried together for 10,000 years. Su Li tried to explain and clarify several times, but it was useless. In the end, she could only let it go. What were all of them thinking? Mu Hongyu suddenly had an ominous feeling. How many copies of this do you have? Jian Fengqi smiled, his eyes flirtatious. I haven't counted. Every time I think of this, I will copy 1, 2, 3, 4 copies. If you really want it, I can write it for you now. Jian Feng. It's too late. Mu Hongyu clenched her fists, ready to fight. Sigh, Jian Fengqi closed his fan. Hongyu, it's not appropriate to fight here, right? This was the Palace of Illusions. Especially when they were still at the entrance of the Divine Gate. Chu Luiyue coughed. Hongyu, don't worry, we're here, there will be opportunities in the future, Jian Fengqi. Musa's anger. Humph. Little you, didn't you say that the person in charge of guarding the gate of heaven was the seventh divine envoy? Who was that? Su asked curiously. Fengqi's. Of it. This is the second time I've seen it. Su Li nodded, deep in thought. Chu Luyue had already told them about the Palace of Illusions. At this moment, a figure walked over from not far away. He was very fast, and in a few seconds, he was in front of them. It was Chang Wanzhou. Master, Lord Sun Yi asked me to come and fetch you and His Highness. Chu Luyue nodded. You came at the right time. I'll take Mr. Su to the Palace of Illusions. I'll leave the rest to you. Chang Wanzhou bowed respectfully. Yes. Chu Luyue looked at Rongxiu. I'll be back soon. Rongxiu's thin lips curled up slightly. Okay. There was nothing to worry about. After Chu Luyue said a few words, he invited Su Li to go to the Palace of Illusions with him. The two figures gradually disappeared into the distance. Rongxiu watched for a while, then retracted his gaze and looked at Chang Wanzhou, raising his eyebrows. Long time no see. You've become a god? Chang Wanzhou responded. Yes. Rongxiu smiled. It was faster than he had expected. Let's go. Chang Wanzhou took a step back, then turned around and led the way. This way, Your Highness. On the other side, Chu Luyue led Su Li directly to the Palace of Illusions. They had walked past the star path. As Su Li walked, she looked around curiously. There were rows upon rows of houses here, but not many people came out. It seemed a little lonely. In the end, her gaze landed on the path that was flickering with spots of light. This is the star path? Chu Luyue nodded. It's the same as the silver bridge from before. There are profound formations sealed below. The part we walked past just now was a profound formation of a profound king master. This part is a great profound king master. Su Li suddenly understood. Then these shouldn't be a problem for little you, She was very clear about how strong Chu Luyue was. These are fine. The troublesome ones are the great grandmaster profound formations in front. Chu Luyue smiled. Su Li was startled and looked forward in disbelief. A long and resplendent path extended upwards, all the way to the palace that stood in the distance. So many. Although she wasn't a profound master, she still had some understanding. A great grandmaster profound formation was several times more difficult than a great profound king master. Moreover, even if a person reached the great grandmaster level, it only meant that they could use a profound formation of this level. It didn't mean that they could completely comprehend a profound formation of the same level. At a rough glance, there were at least 100 of them, right? So in the past 10,000 years, those who could comprehend all the profound formations here and enter the illusory God Palace were few and far between. The seventh divine envoy that I mentioned to you before was one of them. But don't worry. You're a weapon refining saint and have the qualifications to directly enter the illusory God Palace. Chu Luyue smiled. Su Li was speechless. She reached out and patted her chest lightly. Fortunately, I'm a weapon refining master. Otherwise, these profound formations would really be difficult. Chu Luyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Su Li was probably the only person in the entire world who could say such words. Ordinary weapon refining masters wouldn't have an easier time entering the illusory God Palace than profound masters. How could a weapon refining saint break through so easily? Previously, Kong Qinglin was also said to have been stuck as a weapon refining venerable for thousands of years before finally breaking through the shackles and successfully entering that realm. It was just that Su Li's talent in this area was too strong. Moreover, her luck back then was also good. That was why she could so easily become a weapon refining saint. And how many people in the world had such luck? Ordinary people couldn't be envious. The further they went, the quieter their surroundings became. It was a silence that was extremely rare even for cultivators. The surrounding atmosphere also unknowingly became solemn and heavy. Although the two of them only walked by the side of the star road, they could still clearly feel the increasingly heavy pressure. Finally, the two of them arrived at the door. Chu Luiyue was about to knock on the door when he suddenly saw the door open and a person walk out. Chapter 2264. The person who came was Xu Jing. She originally planned to go to Herb Mountain, but she didn't expect to bump into Chu Luiyue as soon as she stepped out. Seeing that familiar face, Xu Jing was startled at first, then immediately frowned. "Shengguanyu, why are you here?" Because of the fear in her heart, her tone and attitude towards Chu Luiyue were much better than before. However, probably because there were no outsiders around, the impatience and irritation in her eyes were still faintly visible. Chu Luiyue didn't mind and smiled faintly. "Greetings, 8th Oracle. I'm here to send Mr. Su to the palace of the illusory god." "Mr. Su?" Xu Jing's gaze turned slightly and only then did she see Su Li standing beside Chu Luiyue. "Exalted goddess?" Her frown deepened. "Shengguanyu, don't tell me you don't know the requirements to enter the palace of the illusory god?" She actually pulled such an ordinary-looking exalted goddess over and said that she wanted to enter the palace of the illusory god? Su Li raised her thin eyebrows slightly. Was she, looking down on her? Although she had always had a good temper, she wasn't someone who would be looked down upon and bullied. Moreover, this person in front of her had specifically bullied little Yu before. The threshold of the palace of the illusory god is really high. So even a weapon-refining saint isn't qualified to enter? Su Li smiled faintly and asked. Xu Jing was startled and a trace of disbelief flashed across her eyes. You're a weapon-refining saint? Why, don't I look like one?" Su Li's lips curved slightly. Xu Jing was momentarily speechless and didn't speak for a long time. Chu Luiyue said. "The 7th Divine Emissary also knows that I invited Mr. Su here. If you don't believe me, you can ask her." Xu Jing's face was a little ugly. She had just parted with Jin Yunlai not long ago, so how could she ask about this now? No need. She turned around and closed the door. Then, she looked at the two with a cold expression. "If you're really a weapon-refining saint, you can naturally enter the palace of the illusory god." Chu Luiyue smiled. "Does the 8th messenger mean that we have to open the door ourselves? Those who have the qualifications and strength to enter the palace of the illusory god will naturally have no problem opening the door." As Xu Jing spoke, she didn't want to talk to them anymore. She turned around and left. Su Li turned around to look at her. This 8th divine emissary is really arrogant. Chu Luiyue was already used to it. All the oracles here are like that, but she is considered outstanding. "Mr. Su, can you open this door?" Su Li retracted her gaze and looked at the closed door in front of her. "It shouldn't be a problem. It's just..." She suddenly paused, a trace of hesitation flashing across her face. Little Yu, this place, she had long heard from Chu Luiyue that this illusory god palace was exactly the same as the pavilion in the sky that appeared in the Red Moon Desert. Therefore, before coming, she had already mentally prepared herself. However, when she arrived here and saw the palace that truly existed, she still felt very strange. She thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask in a low voice. "Little Yu, have you tried going in?" Chu Luiyue shook her head. "No. It's also my first time here." Su Li looked at her, a trace of light flickering in her eyes. "Since you were able to directly enter at that time, perhaps, it's the same here?" Chu Luiyue's heart moved. Actually, she had thought of this before. After all, from the beginning, everything in the illusory god palace seemed to be against her. However, she didn't have any plans to try it for the time being. There were so many people in the illusory god palace. She didn't know how many pairs of eyes were staring at this place. If she really went in directly, it would cause a lot of trouble. That wasn't what she wanted to see right now. Therefore, for the sake of caution, she still chose to pass by. Su Li saw the change in her expression and instantly understood something. Then, "I'll go in and take a look first." Chu Luyue gently nodded. Su Li took a few steps forward and stretched out her hand. The moment her palm touched the door, she immediately felt that there was a gaze sweeping across her body. At this moment, it was as if her entire person was seen through. Su Li calmed down and exerted force on her hand. Creak, the door opened. She turned her gaze slightly and looked at Chu Luyue. "I'm going in. Mr. Su, please be careful." Su Li nodded and walked in without hesitation. Then, the door closed again. Chu Luyue stared at the door for a while and turned to leave. At this moment, a slight fluctuation suddenly came from her dantian. For some reason, the water droplet floating quietly in his dantian started to ripple. Chu Luyue's heart tightened and immediately suppressed it. She quickly turned around to take a look. Just now, there seemed to be a force that was calling her. She slowly clenched her hands in her sleeves and stood there waiting for a while. Seeing that nothing was wrong, she left. At the same time, in front of the empty black jade square, a figure suddenly appeared. It was the second messenger of God, Yu Qian. His expression was slightly serious as he stared at the black jade square in front of him. His eyes seemed to be surging with waves. He had only left for a short while and there was actually such a commotion here. Could it be? At this moment, light footsteps came from behind him. He immediately turned around to look. His eyes were extremely sharp, like a cold light piercing through. Su Li stopped in her tracks and looked at the man who suddenly appeared in front of her. Her heart was in her throat. This man was extremely dangerous. Moreover, he seemed to be extremely hostile towards her. However, she had only just arrived and had not even seen the other party. Where did this hostility come from? "Who are you?" Yu Qian asked in a low voice. Su Li suppressed her emotions and looked calm on the surface. She nodded and bowed. Her voice was calm and gentle. "Su Li," Yu Qian frowned and his eyes swept across her face. Finally, his gaze fell on the letter at her waist. "Are you new?" "Yes." Yu Qian stared at her for a long time before slowly saying, "Refining saint?" Su Li was shocked. Refining saints were different from martial artists. Their cultivation level was hidden very deeply. Outsiders basically could not see it. However, this man only looked at her for a while and guessed it directly. "Yes." She nodded. The trace of worry in Yu Qian's heart disappeared. All the refining saints in the world had an inseparable close relationship with the palace of the illusory god. This meant that the fluctuation just now was caused by her. Go southwest. The fifth messenger of God will be in charge. Su Li felt that the dangerous aura of the other party disappeared in an instant. She was puzzled, but she did not ask. "Thank you, messenger of God." Although she did not know the other party's ranking, in the palace of the illusory god, to have such an aura, it must be the messenger of God. Yu Qian had already looked at the black jade square again. The flame at the top of the white jade pillar was much dimmer than before. He frowned. "Digression, today, I have to go out and try to get to 6:00. Chapter 2265. On the other side, Chang Wanzhou had already brought his men back to his residence. Due to the arrival of Rong Xiu and the others, the original courtyard was no longer big enough. However, Cin Yi had already tidied up the few courtyards beside them and was waiting for them to arrive. There were many courtyards in the Illusion God Palace, and the few courtyards beside them happened to be empty, so it was convenient for them. This commotion also attracted the attention of some people. Xiaofan was originally sitting on his roof in boredom, staring at the star path and deep in thought. When he saw Chang Wanzhou coming over with his men, he was shocked. Because he had never seen the people behind him before. On second thought, he remembered that Chu Luyue seemed to have said that he would go back and invite the artifact refining saint over. But why were there so many people? Seeing the group of people approaching, Xiaofan touched his chin. These people are not weak, especially the young man in front, who was dressed in snow-white clothes. He was handsome and devilish, exuding a noble aura. If I'm not wrong, he should be that girl's husband? There was also the young man in black clothes behind him. He held a sword in one hand and looked cold and indifferent. He seemed to be a follower, but he had already broken through to the god realm. Xiaofan was suddenly stunned and stared at Yan Qing a few more times. This person. Why does he look so familiar, as if I've seen him somewhere before? He frowned slightly and kept searching in his mind, but he couldn't find an answer. However, that familiar feeling lingered in his mind. At this moment, Yan Qing sensed his gaze and looked over. His facial features were handsome, but there was a faint coldness in his eyes. He was like a moving iceberg. In just an instant, Yan Qing retracted his gaze. Xiaofan touched his chin. This person. I've never seen him before. Perhaps it was just my imagination. While Xiaofan was secretly conflicted, Rong Xiao and the others had already arrived. Sun Yi was already waiting at the door. When he saw Rong Xiao and the others, he nodded slightly and bowed. Your Highness. Rong Xiao's gaze swept past him as he nodded and walked in. Xiaofan didn't withdraw his gaze until all of them had entered the room. He frowned slightly. No matter how he looked at it, there didn't seem to be a problem. But, bang! Suddenly, there was a loud explosion. Xiaofan quickly raised his eyes to look over, only to see a silver stream of light soaring into the sky from the star passage. It quickly transformed into a profound formation in midair. Someone else is taking the star path? Xiaofan's heart skipped a beat. He instantly soared into the air and looked over. When he saw it, he was overjoyed. Wasn't the woman who was currently standing on the star passage breaking the profound formation Chu Luyue? She had just brought people back, and she was already trying to break the Xian formation? Isn't this a little too efficient? Just as Xiaofan was thinking about this, he saw another ray of light fly up, another Xian formation was successfully activated. He was taken aback. Little girl, how can you be so fast? The commotion on the star passage quickly attracted the attention of the other people in the illusory god palace. When they discovered that this person was still Chu Luyue, many people were rather surprised. Isn't that Sheng Wanyu? Why is she taking the star path again so quickly? It seems like only half a month has passed since she turned back halfway. In such a short time, she has already comprehended the profound formation of the Great Xian Emperor Division. TSK. She has already activated 2 profound formations consecutively. It's probably not right to say that she has only broken one, right? Other things aside, her talent as a Xian master is indeed very shocking. I wonder how far she can go this time. She probably came because she has a certain level of confidence. However, the number of profound formations in the Great Xian Emperor Division is not small. She has only deciphered less than 1/10 of them. She might be able to walk for a while, but it probably won't be too long. Everyone had different opinions about Chu Luyue's actions. Some were looking forward to it, while others disagreed. Chu Luyue, who was standing on the star path, automatically ignored all these voices. She had originally planned to continue walking the star path after inviting Su Li over. To the current her, these profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor Division were no longer of any difficulty. The key was whether Su Li could find some information on her side. And during this period of time, she also planned to walk forward as much as possible. This way, if something happened, she could openly enter the illusory god palace with the fastest speed possible. With this thought, she lightly waved her hands in front of her. Several streams of light flew out and intertwined with each other. Not long after, another profound formation was deciphered. She took a step forward and continued forward. Time slowly passed. The number of onlookers also increased. Gradually, they finally realized that Chu Luyue did not seem to have returned on a whim because she had deciphered a few profound formations at the last moment. She had clearly made preparations long ago. Seeing her decipher profound formations one after another and easily activate them, everyone's attitude rapidly changed. These profound formations of the Great Xian Emperor division are not simple. She actually managed to draw them so smoothly and easily. In the crowd, someone could not help but mutter in a low voice, unable to conceal the shock in his voice. Chapter 2266. Hearing her voice, those people turned their heads and looked over. They hadn't noticed it before, but now that Mu Yafeng took the initiative to speak, they realized that she had come here without them knowing. They immediately became nervous. Did she hear what they said just now? No matter what, Mu Yafeng was the most promising Xian master in the illusory god palace to complete the Star Road. Now that someone was performing better than her, how could she feel good? They looked at each other, and one of them finally couldn't help but ask. Mu Yafeng, what do you mean by that? Could it be that Sheng Guanyu has really seen these Xian formations? That's impossible. How long has she been in the illusory god palace? And this is her first time coming to this place on the Star Road. It's not good to say such things, right? Another person said softly. Mu Yafeng smiled coldly. What's there to not say? When she passed by the Xian King teacher's Xian formation, didn't she say that she had seen a portion of it before? They choked. Chu Luyue did say that, but those Xian formations weren't very high level. Those who had some background in the Divine Ruins world might have seen many of them. There was nothing much to say about that. But the Xian King teacher's Xian formation was different. In the world, there was no place with more high-level Xian formations than the illusory god palace. Even if she had seen them before, it was at most a portion. It was absolutely impossible for her to see all of them, let alone cover all the Xian formations on the Star Road. Do you really think that there's someone in this world who can instantly comprehend the Xian formations of the great Xian King teacher with just a glance? Mu Yafeng said softly with a calm expression. Their expressions changed. What do you mean by that? That's right. No matter how talented Chu Luyue was, she shouldn't be so heaven-defying. If this continued, she could almost tie with the seventh divine emissary, right? One had to know that even the seventh divine emissary spent hundreds of years to complete the Star Road. This was also why he could become the seventh divine emissary. How long had Chu Luyue been here? Wasn't this going too smoothly? Mu Yafeng said. I don't mean anything. Everyone has sharp eyes, and I don't need to say anything. These words made people even more suspicious. Suddenly, a young man beside him seemed to have thought of something. Oh, right. I remember that Sheng Guanyu has a good relationship with Zhenbao Pavilion. Lord Ji seemed to have personally looked for her and invited her to the treasure pavilion. As soon as these words were spoken, it immediately caused quite a commotion. Really? Did His Excellency personally invite him? What kind of status does Lord Ji have? Why would he be so courteous to her? But she doesn't have a bloodline totem. Logically speaking, this shouldn't be the case, right? Of course it's true. I'm not the only one who saw it that day. Wait, did you forget that the treasure pavilion still has a copy of the mythical flame diagram? Could it be that she saw this? The crowd fell silent for a moment. They knew very well what the mythical flame diagram was. If that was the case, it wouldn't be difficult to explain all of this. However, there was another problem. The mythical diagram of flame is so precious. How can Shengguan be qualified to read it? You want to buy it? That was impossible. Even a well-known figure like Mu Yafeng, who had been accumulating wealth for many years, didn't have enough capital to buy it. Needless to say, the others didn't. Could it be that His Excellency Ji is behind this? Someone whispered, but halfway through, he was suddenly interrupted. I say, what's the point of guessing here and there? Everyone, including Mu Yafeng, was shocked and turned around to look. Xiaofan had appeared not far behind them. At this moment, he was leaning lazily against the wall with his arms crossed. He looked at them with a half-smile. Anyway, His Excellency Mingshu spends most of his time in the treasure pavilion. Isn't it better for you to go over and ask him? Everyone was speechless. His Excellency Mingshu always looked amiable, but everyone knew that he was not to be trifled with. Even the 8th Divine Envoy was not afraid of the treasure pavilion, let alone them. If they went over now, wouldn't they be making trouble for themselves? When Mu Yafeng saw Xiaofan, a trace of fear flashed across her eyes. However, at this moment, Xiaofan suddenly looked over. Mu Yafeng. The corners of his lips curled up. Others may not know why Shengguan was able to progress so smoothly on the Star Road, but don't you know? Mu Yafeng's lips instantly turned pale. The people beside her looked at Mu Yafeng and then at Xiaofan in confusion. What was he hinting at? However, Xiaofan didn't say anything else. He turned his gaze and looked at Chu Luyue. Actually, he was also very curious. How far could she go this time? Mu Yafeng clenched her fists and shut her mouth. The fact that Chu Luyue was copying Xian formations for the treasure pavilion was considered a secret. If this was said by Chu Luyue or the treasure pavilion, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, if it was said by her, it was different. Although she was very unhappy with the fact that the treasure pavilion was biased towards Chu Luyue, she wasn't stupid enough to offend them publicly. While he was arguing, Chu Luyue had already cracked 3 more Xian formations. Many people were bewildered when they saw her stubbornly moving forward. Where can she go? Rong Xiao stood in the courtyard and looked up slightly. He could see the silver stream of light rushing into the sky. Xian formations quickly condensed and dissipated, and the distance kept moving forward. Obviously, she was getting closer and closer to the illusory god palace. Shengguan Jing walked out of the house and lowered his eyes, as if in deep thought. He had just asked Tang Ke some questions. Ever since he saw Kong Qinglin break through to the weapon-refining saint realm with his own eyes, he vaguely felt that he was closer to that threshold. However, a little bit was still a little bit. Fortunately, Tang Ke was also here and gave him a lot of advice. He felt that he had comprehended something, but he was still lacking something to break through the window paper. Seeing Rong Xiao standing in the courtyard, he raised his voice and said, "Rong Xiao, you've just arrived at the illusory god palace. Why don't you walk around?" Chapter 2267. Hearing this, Rong Xiao looked back and smiled faintly. Since I'm already here, there's no need to rush. Seeing that he was calm and composed, Shengguan Jing was also relieved. Rong Xiao was extremely talented and resourceful. He probably already had his own plans and didn't need others to worry about him. Following his line of sight, Shengguan Jing smiled. It seems that you is going quite well. Rong Xiao nodded slightly. Yes. Those Xian formations were indeed nothing to her. Shengguan Jing waved his hand. Keep an eye on that girl and tell her not to be so anxious. I'll go into seclusion for the next few days. Previously, when Chu Luyue wasn't here, he had been carefully watching over this group of people. Now that Rong Xiao was here, he could finally free up some time. Rong Xiao's thin lips curled slightly. Don't worry. Only then did Shengwan Jing return to his room. Illusory God Palace. Jin Yunlai walked out of the door and looked into the distance. She's continuing. The commotion on the Star Road wasn't small. It was hard for him not to know. After staring for a while, Jin Yunlai's expression gradually became serious. Chu Liuyue's speed was much faster than he expected. It seems that she's really obtained the mythical flame diagram? Jin Yunlai murmured softly. Previously, Mu Yafeng only sent a message saying that Treasure Pavilion had asked Chu Liyue to copy the Xian formations on the second floor. But at that time, he wasn't sure which ones were which. But now, everything couldn't be clearer. If she hadn't read the mythical flame diagram, she wouldn't have been able to go so smoothly on the Star Road. It seems that Treasure Pavilion really values her. They're even willing to part with this thing. Jin Yunlai frowned slightly. But he was still puzzled. Because even so, she shouldn't be so fast. The further she went, the more complicated and difficult the profound formations became. However, her speed was not affected at all. This almost made people suspect that she had already memorized all the Xian formations in the entire Xian formation in her mind. But, how is this possible? No matter how high her comprehension ability was, it shouldn't be this fast. Perhaps I should find a time to talk to Chu Liyue. At this moment, a familiar fluctuation came from the front. Jin Yunlai's heart tightened. Then, a figure appeared in the void. The enchanting book and the crimson golden feather also flew out. Jin Yunlai quickly caught the item. Lord Yuemo, why are you back so soon? He had thought that he would have to wait for several days. Yuemo smiled faintly. The Celestial Emperor already knows the names on the list. Naturally, it won't take long. What's more, the gate of heaven was still open, and there were many things that the seventh divine emissary had to take care of. Jin Yunlai said respectfully. Yes. This was probably the Celestial Emperor's order. If the Celestial Emperor has any other orders, I will inform you. Yuemo said. Jin Yunlai responded. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked. Lord Yuemo, wasn't it Lord Yen Qing who was in charge of the palace of the illusory god? Why was it suddenly changed to Yuemo? Yuemo said faintly. Seventh divine emissary, this kind of thing shouldn't concern you, right? Jin Yunlai was shocked. Only then did he realize that he had crossed the line and immediately took half a step back. Lord Yuemo, please forgive me. I didn't mean to offend you. Yuemo stared at him for a while. It's good that you know. After saying that, he turned and left. After a long time, Jin Yunlai let out a long sigh. Chapter 2268. Herb Mountain. Compared to the past, this place was much livelier now. Ever since Xu Jing was reprimanded in public and abolished many of the rules she had set, the celestial physician of the illusionary god palace was no longer restrained and could freely come and go to Herb Mountain. When Xu Jing arrived, she saw such a scene. She looked around and saw that almost every mountain was crowded with people. All kinds of medicinal herbs were constantly being picked. Although this was not the first time she had seen this scene, Xu Jing's heart still skipped a beat. In the past, if these people wanted to get these things, they would have to put in a lot of effort and try to curry favor with her. But now, they no longer put her in their eyes. Even when a few people walked past her, they only greeted her with a simple salute and left quickly. If it was in the past, Xu Jing took a deep breath and suppressed all the messy thoughts in her mind. Now that things had become like this, it was useless for her to think more. She did not want to give up the position of the eighth divine envoy. However, at this moment, she glanced out of the corner of her eye and suddenly saw many people heading towards a certain mountain peak. She was in a daze when she saw a woman leisurely walking over from afar. She was wearing a colorful dress, and her black hair fluttered in the wind. Her graceful figure was fully displayed as she moved. The colorful string on her wrist was decorated with small jade fragments. She only needed to lift her hand slightly to tuck her hair behind her ear, and the sound of the bracelet could be heard. Xu Jing's face immediately turned cold. Those people were obviously heading towards that woman. "Miss Little Hachi, we meet again. What a coincidence. Ha ha ha. Miss Little Hachi, did you bring back enough medicinal herbs last time? What have you taken a fancy to today? Why don't I help you look? Miss Little Hachi, I heard that you are quite interested and talented in refining medicine. Why don't we exchange pointers when we have time? How about it?" Extremely earnest voices could be heard one after another. Many young men came to Little Hachi's side with eager faces. Little Hachi plucked an ice lotus and smiled lazily. "I've been coming here every day recently, so it's not a coincidence that we've run into each other. Also, there are so many medicinal herbs here, I can take whatever I like. As for sparring..." She blinked, and her thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly. Her beautiful eyes were flowing with light, and it was especially alluring. "I'm not that free. Most of these people were only grand physicians. How could they compare notes with her? If she had the time, she might as well go back and continue refining pills. Ever since she broke through to senior doctor, Big Brother really knew how to squeeze her dry." Thinking of this, she sighed sadly and resentfully. "Besides, I've been very tired recently." Everyone was originally embarrassed by her words, but when they saw her frown, they all felt sorry for her. "If that's the case, we won't disturb you any further." That's right, that's right. Little Hachi, go back and rest as soon as you're done." Finally, it was quiet. Little Eight blinked his eyes and smiled in satisfaction. Then, he leisurely picked some herbs. These people were really interesting. Previously, because she had offended the 8th Divine Envoy, none of them dared to say a word. Now that the situation had reversed, they were no longer afraid and followed her. Pfft. After choosing, she prepared to leave. However, just as she turned around, she felt a gaze that could not be considered kind fall on her. She stopped in her tracks and looked up. Then, she smiled. 8th Divine Envoy, it's been a long time. Xu Jing did not want to pay much attention to her, but seeing the smile on her face, he felt that it was especially dazzling. Although the herb mountain is open now, the herbs inside are especially precious. If you can't make good use of them, it's better not to take so much. It's more appropriate to leave things for others who need them more. Little Hachi was stunned. 8th Divine Envoy, why do you say that? Why did this medicinal herb become a waste in my hands? Xu Jing looked at her coldly and indifferently. This woman was like a demon. All her thoughts were probably spent on her face. How could she have the time and energy to think about refining pills? With so many people disturbing you all day, you probably can't refine pills well. Xu Jing's words were tactful and sarcastic. He was just short of directly saying that Little Hachi only thought about hooking up with men every day. The expressions of many people around them changed when they heard this. No matter what, it was not nice to say such things to a girl. Unexpectedly, just when they all thought that Little Hachi was going to flip out, Little Hachi suddenly smiled. Oh, 8th Divine Envoy, are you talking about this? You don't have to worry about this. Although it's a little annoying sometimes, I'm already used to it. People who don't catch my eye will definitely not disturb me. It's the same no matter how many people there are. Oh, I almost forgot. 8th Divine Envoy, you probably haven't experienced this before. That's why you think that people's hearts are so easily swayed. She took a step forward and tilted her head to smile. 8th Divine Envoy, if you've seen this many times like me, you'll naturally get used to it. Xu Jing was instantly furious. This Little Hachi, was she mocking her? She was the 8th Divine Envoy. Of course, she could not be compared to this seductive girl. Hey, eighth divine envoy, I see that the dark circles under your eyes are getting heavier. Have you not been resting well recently? Well, if I were to be reprimanded in front of everyone, I reckon that I wouldn't be able to hold my head up high. Impudent. Hee, eighth divine envoy, don't be angry. I'm just joking with you, I've never been scolded by anyone before. Of course, I can't understand how you feel right now. If I've said something wrong, please be magnanimous and don't hold it against me. Xu Jing was already choked to the point that she could not say a word. Only a raging fire seemed to be burning in her chest. She could not wait to tear the girl in front of her apart. Little Hachi had already waved her small hand and lifted her feet to leave. The medicinal ingredients this time are enough for a while. I'll come back after a while. Eighth divine envoy, let's meet again another day. After successfully choking Xu Jing, little Hachi was in a good mood. She happily returned to her residence. However, before she reached her destination, she saw a person standing at the intersection. She stopped in her tracks. That person had already seen her. After hesitating for a moment, he came forward to greet her. Miss Little Hachi. Little Hachi looked at him in surprise. Liang He? Why are you here again? Didn't he run away because of her anger? Didn't he say that he would never look for her again? Why? Liang He's face turned red. Miss Little Hachi, I was reckless that day. Please don't take it to heart. After I went back that day, I've thought about it carefully. Little Hachi is a peerless beauty with countless admirers. I really don't have the qualifications to ask Little Hachi to like me. He hesitated for a while before he spoke with difficulty. Miss Little Hachi, I've thought about it. Your proposal that day. I can accept it. Little Hachi? Digression, in the end, a bootlicker will end up with nothing. Chapter 2269. Is Liang He crazy? The corner of Little Hachi's mouth twitched as she took half a step back. This isn't too good, right? Liang He hurriedly said, Lady Little Hachi, I remember you said that the person you like isn't in the Illusion God Palace, right? If he doesn't come, then. Lady Little Hachi, can you consider me for a while? Little Hachi took half a step back. You mean, you want this lady to be with you first, and when he comes, you can leave? Liang He's face was extremely embarrassed, but he still nodded. When he heard Little Eight's words that day, he was indeed extremely angry in his heart. That was why he left angrily after saying those harsh words. But these days, Little Hachi's figure kept appearing in his mind. He couldn't sleep with anyone, and he couldn't do anything else. His entire mind was in a mess. Thus, after thinking for a while, he finally made this extremely difficult decision. Although he also felt that this was very bad, after saying it out loud, his heart felt a bit more relaxed. Of course, he also had his own plans. What kind of place was the Illusion God Palace? How could he come and go as he pleased? Who knows, that person might never come. Even if he came, it wasn't as if he didn't have a way to deal with him. Little Hachi saw that his expression was firm, as if he was really going to do this. She immediately felt unwell. What was this called? After waiting for Little Hachi's reply for a long time, Liang He was also a bit nervous. Lady Little Hachi, what do you think? Little Hachi. Suddenly, a calm and cold voice came from behind him. Little Hachi raised her head and saw that a person had already opened the door to the courtyard. He was holding a sword with both hands and standing upright, looking over with an indifferent expression. It was Yan Qing. Little Hachi widened her eyes in shock, almost suspecting that she had seen wrongly. Wasn't this person in the Peach Blossom Cove? Why did he suddenly come here? After thinking for a moment, she immediately realized something. You followed His Highness here? Yan Qing nodded. His expression was still handsome and cold. His eyes swept across the two, stopping for a moment on Liang He. Liang He? Liang He's face filled with astonishment. You know me? Yan Qing said indifferently, I've heard of you. Liang He was even more puzzled. This person didn't seem to be from the illusion god palace. You are, from the looks of it, he came from the courtyard and seemed to be very familiar with little 8, Yan Qing. Liang He looked, Yanzas His Highness Tian, Ants Hachi Hizas, of Sav, SSS. Was, SSS, she, T's, S sheet. She said softly, Yan Qing, you're finally here. I've been waiting for so long. Yan Qing's body stiffened. He wanted to push her hand away, but when he looked down and saw her beautiful eyes, he suddenly stopped. Liang He was also stunned. Miss Little Hachi, you are, during this period of time, he had some understanding of Little Hachi. Although she was enchanting and beautiful, in reality, she was very distant and polite when interacting with other people. Apart from Chu Luyue and a few others, she was indifferent to most people. She didn't even bother to talk to them. Not to mention such an intimate attitude. Little Hachi moved forward, intending to hug Yan Qing's arm. However, Yan Qing was holding his sword with both hands, motionless. It was like an iron cylinder defense. She raised her head and glared at him. She reached out and pinched his waist. Give me your arm. Hurry up. Would it kill him to cooperate with her? However, she didn't manage to twist it. Yan Qing's waist was thin. Under his thin clothes, there were tough muscles. Her pinch was like a toy to him. Yan Qing lowered his eyes to look at her. Little Hachi threw 2 daggers at him. Yan Qing let go of his arm. Little Hachi immediately took advantage of the situation. Her slender white arms held his arm, and she moved closer to him. Her skin was really too white. Under the sunlight, it glowed with a clear and lustrous light. It was as if a slight force would leave a mark on it. Yan Qing calmly looked away. Little Hachi had already turned around to look at Liang He. Now, is it clear enough? Liang He's face turned pale. He didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, she would come after he had just gritted his teeth and made such a difficult decision. He paused for a moment before asking, Is this the person you said you liked before? Yan Qing's eyebrows twitched. Then, he heard the woman beside him laugh softly. Yes. Yan Qing lowered his eyes slightly. Look, her appearance, figure, and temperament. Which one of them isn't the best? Little Hachi said as she tapped the back of Yan Qing's hand. I remember that you've broken through to God before, right? Yan Qing paused. Yes. Little Hachi immediately raised her eyebrows and smiled proudly. Very good. What she wanted was to crush him. Liang He, now, do you still want to compete? If you were me, who would you choose? Liang He choked and couldn't say anything. It was one thing to hear about it before, and another to see it with his own eyes. If this person hadn't come, he could still convince himself, but now, she saw such a man standing beside her, and she was intimately leaning against him. The two of them were so close that there was no gap between them, just like a perfect couple. If he continued to pester her, he would really become the joke of the entire illusion god palace. Liang He gritted his teeth, but his face was pale. If he had known earlier, Liang He, right? Before he could continue, Yan Qing's arm dropped and grabbed Little Hachi's hand. His palm was hot, and Little Hachi immediately shivered and looked back at him in surprise. Yan Qing's expression was as cold as before. He looked at Liang He and said lightly, Since she has already rejected you, please respect yourself. From today onwards, you are not allowed to be within 10 steps of her. Otherwise, you don't want to know how fast my sword is. The last sentence was cold and heavy, and it was a naked threat. Liang He's face turned red, and he was extremely embarrassed. But he was a celestial doctor. Unless he couldn't take it anymore, he wouldn't fight with a venerable god expert. Yan Qing was too lazy to care about his reply. He pulled Little Hachi and turned around. Little Hachi, let's go. Little 8 blinked. Seeing Liang He's defeated expression, and knowing that he wasn't going to chase after them, Little 8 happily followed him. The courtyard's door was quickly closed. Liang He stood there for a while. Feeling extremely embarrassed, he finally left in a hurry. Little 8 turned his head to take a look and saw that he had already fled. Instantly, he narrowed his eyes in satisfaction and smiled. To deal with this kind of person, she had to use ruthless moves. Although she was shocked when he agreed to her suggestion, after thinking about it carefully, she felt that something was wrong. Liang He was the youngest supreme doctor in the Illusion God Palace. How could he really do this? As soon as Yan Qing appeared, he was forced to retreat. She turned around. Lord Yan Qing, many thanks. I couldn't tell that you were quite sensible. Yan Qing let go of her hand. His fingertips seemed to still have that delicate and smooth touch, as well as a faint wisp of her fragrance. He said softly, "It's nothing. Don't mention it." Chapter 2270. Little Hachi pursed her red lips. There was nothing wrong with Yan Qing. He was just as cold as an iceberg all day long. He was so serious that he was almost stubborn. She thanked him sincerely, but he was still so polite. She yawned. Then I won't disturb you, Mr. Yan Qing. I'll go back first. She had just taken a step when Yan Qing called her again. Miss Little Hachi. Little Hachi paused and looked back at him. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. What did you call me just now? Yan Qing was stunned. Miss Little Hachi. That's not right. You just called me Little 8. Little Hachi walked forward and came to Yan Qing. She tilted her head and looked at him. Why did you call me Little Hachi now? You sound so unfamiliar. She thought they were already familiar with each other. Yan Qing paused for a moment. There was a reason just now. Little Hachi stared at him for a while and snorted. Forget it. Call me whatever you want. She couldn't teach this person in a short time. After solving a small problem, Little 8's mood was still very good. Moreover, it could be said that he owed Yan Qing a favor. Please take care of me in the future, Mr. Yan Qing. If something like this happens again, please remember to help me, Mr. Yan Qing. Yan Qing's expression changed slightly. In the future? This is not appropriate, is it? How could Little 8 not know what he was thinking? His lips curled up. Mr. Yan Qing, you're not married, and I'm not married. What's wrong with this? She didn't care about those people, but as time passed and there were more and more people, she would be annoyed occasionally. Now that Yan Qing was here, wouldn't it save her a lot of trouble? Yan Qing looked at her and asked. If one day Little Hachi girl meets someone she likes, then I'll explain to him when the time comes. Little Hachi patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry, I won't implicate others because of this. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes widened slightly. Could it be that Lord Yan Qing already has someone he likes? If that was the case, then it was indeed inappropriate for her to do so. Yan Qing looked at her and his Adam's apple bobbed. No. Little Hachi was relieved and smiled again. That's good, that's good. I'll take my leave first. I won't disturb Lord Yan Qing. As he spoke, he walked towards his room. After a long time, Yan Qing withdrew her gaze and rubbed her fingertips gently. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. Chu Luiyue was still moving forward on the star path. She had already deciphered almost all of the Grand Xian King Division's profound formations. The one in front of her was the last one. As long as she successfully executed this, it would mean that she had completed 4/5 of the entire star path and officially stepped into the path of a Grand Master's profound formation. The surrounding people were also waiting with bated breath. At this point, Chu Liuyue's talent and strength were already beyond doubt. Even if she didn't have a bloodline totem, everything she had displayed so far was enough to make people exclaim in admiration. Previously, when she broke Mu Yafeng's record, everyone thought that she was at most a little stronger than Mu Yafeng. But looking at it now, how was it just a little? Chu Liyue had clearly left Mu Yafeng far behind. Bang! A silver stream of light flew up. A profound formation instantly condensed above Chu Liyue's head. She raised her head slightly and took a look. Then, she let out a long breath. Actually, her mental energy and strength were also greatly exhausted at this time. Her lips were somewhat pale. She closed her eyes and adjusted the aura in her body. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Is she going to stop? She can't not stop. Isn't she a Grand Xian King teacher? The profound formations in front are all at the Grand Master level. That's true. But even so, she's still really powerful. This speed, if it were me, I really wouldn't dare to think about it. If she also had a bloodline totem, what would Mu Yafeng do? I reckon that the 7th divine emissary would also treat her differently. What a pity. All kinds of discussions came one after another. There were also some people who quietly looked at Mu Yafeng and observed her expression. It was just that Mu Yafeng was expressionless at this time, so they couldn't see anything. Of course, she was definitely unhappy. If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't be happy at this time. How could Mu Yafeng not know that these people were looking at her? All these years, because she was highly regarded by the 7th divine emissary, she was pursued by many people and also secretly envied by many people. There were definitely many people who were waiting to see her make a fool of herself. So no matter what, she definitely couldn't show anything at this time. Seeing that the last profound formation of a Grand Xian King teacher was also displayed, Mu Yafeng's hands in her sleeves clenched into a ball. It didn't matter. She was only a Grand Xian King teacher. Even if she had already seen the mythical flame diagram, it was impossible for her to comprehend those profound formations in such a short time. How could that threshold be crossed so easily? Thinking of this, Mu Yafeng's mood finally improved a little. She turned around and planned to leave. However, at this time, the surrounding crowd suddenly became restless. Many people sucked in cold air and let out waves of exclamations. Mu Yafeng immediately felt uneasy and turned around to look. This look finally caused the calm expression on her face to crack. A trace of shock and disbelief flowed out from between her brows. The woman standing on the star path didn't leave as everyone expected. Instead, after a short rest, she continued forward. Without the slightest hesitation, she stepped in. At the same time, a spot of light suddenly lit up. A Grand Master profound formation. Chapter 2271. Without any hesitation, she stepped into the path of the great Grand Master Xian formation. Countless streams of light flew out from her hands and quickly intertwined with each other to draw an extremely complicated Xian formation. Many people were dazzled just by looking at it. However, from the beginning to the end, Chu Liuyue's movements did not have the slightest hesitation or pause. Every ray of light seemed to have its own consciousness as they landed where they were supposed to be. After a while, the outline of a Xian formation appeared in front of her. The lines on it were also quickly filling in and outlining. She's actually trying to use a great Grandmaster Xian formation. After the initial commotion, the surrounding crowd quieted down. Countless pairs of eyes stared at this scene without blinking, afraid that they would miss something. Mu Yafeng was also watching. However, the more she watched, the more panicked she felt. From the looks of it, Chu Luyue did not seem to be using a great grandmaster Xian formation for the first time. Could it be that she's hiding her strength? Mu Yafeng could not help but murmur softly. Other than this answer, she could not think of any other reasonable explanation. However, Chu Luyue was a god and had just broken through to Supreme Doctor. How could she still be a great grandmaster? Even if the illusory god palace gathered all the top geniuses in the world, there had never been such a heaven-defying person. Illusory god palace. When Chu Luyue stepped forward and began to try to use a great grandmaster Xian formation, Jin Yunlai knew about it. He stood with his hands behind his back and stared in the direction of the star path. After a moment, he no longer hesitated and walked outside. Even if she did not have a bloodline totem, such talent was extremely rare. He had to make a trip there personally. When he passed by the Black Jade Square, he glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw Yu Qian standing there. Jin Yunlai stopped in his tracks, half-turned, and bowed in Yu Qian's direction. Second Divine Envoy. Yu Qian asked, "Are you planning to meet Shengguanyu?" Jin Yunlai was not surprised that he guessed it and nodded. "Yes." Yu Qian smiled. "I heard that he's not even 20 years old yet. To be able to perform so well, it's indeed rare." Jin Yunlai looked at him strangely. Yu Qian's standards were actually very high. There weren't many people in the entire illusory god palace that could receive such praise from him. "Just go ahead. After she finishes walking the Star Road, bring her to Fengming Mountain and say that I want to see her." Jin Yunlai was shocked. Fengming Mountain? Yu Qian nodded and laughed. "You probably don't know, but the current young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is her contracted magical beast." Jin Yunlai walked out of the illusory shrine with mixed feelings and followed the star path. The moment he appeared on the star passage, he immediately attracted the attention of many people. "The seventh divine emissary is here. Are you here for Shengguanyu? That must be it, right? After all, Shengguanyu is the only one on the star passage. With such talent and performance, the seventh divine emissary would have already arrived if it were someone else. It's just that Shengguanyu doesn't have a bloodline totem, so it's been delayed until now." Mu Yafeng heard the commotion and immediately looked up. When she saw that it was really Jin Yunlai, she pursed her lips and dug her nails into her palms. Even this person is here. Is Chu Luyue really going to make a comeback? Bang! A loud explosion sounded. Mu Yafeng turned around in realization and saw a silver profound formation that was much bigger than the one before. It was also much brighter and more dazzling than before. It was like a flower blooming in midair. The bright light illuminated the surroundings, and it also added a layer of faint light to Chu Luyue, who was standing below. Everyone was silent. The Grandmaster Xian formation was completed. This also meant that Chu Luyue had officially broken through to the Grandmaster Xian formation. Mu Yafeng's face turned pale and she almost couldn't stand straight. She had suffered too many blows during this period of time. Moreover, they all came from the same person. Every time she thought that she had guessed Chu Luyue's true cultivation level, the other party would display even more shocking abilities. Looking at the great Grandmaster's Xian formation that had been successfully unleashed, there was a moment where she was completely stunned. She wasn't the only one. Most of the onlookers felt the same way. Including Jin Yunlai. He couldn't help but frown as he looked at the woman in a red dress with her hair flying in the wind. "You deliberately concealed your strength before this?" Chu Luyue looked up. The Xian formation was displayed perfectly and it was a good start. Only when she heard Jin Yunlai's voice did she retract her gaze, and the corners of her lips raised into a brilliant arc. "No, why would the seventh divine emissary say that?" Jin Yunlai didn't believe her. "If you weren't a grandmaster, how could you have comprehended this Xian formation in such a short time? Even a grandmaster would need at least a month to do so." She hadn't even been in the illusory god palace for that long. Chu Luiyue smiled lightly. Seventh Divine Emissary, I believe you can tell if I'm hiding my strength or not. As for how I did it in such a short time, the reason is simple, I'm very talented. Jin Yunlai, everyone, no one could refute this answer. Looking at Chu Luiyue's magnanimous and relaxed appearance, Jin Yunlai's heart wavered. Could it be that I really underestimated her before? When she walked the star path last time, I did pay attention. She was indeed a Grandmaster Xian. Did she really break through recently? But this was too, Jin Yunlai frowned. He suddenly understood why the Precious Treasures Pavilion had chosen her. If what she said was true, then, the aptitude she possessed was extremely terrifying. Jin Yunlai stared at her for a while and asked again. Do you still want to continue? Chu Luiyue glanced ahead. The Xian formations in this area were relatively simple and wouldn't take too much effort. But Jin Yunlai's arrival at this time seemed a little unusual. No. She shook her head and looked at Jin Yunlai. Seventh Divine Emissary, are you looking for me for something? Jin Yunlai knew that she was very smart, so she didn't hide it and simply nodded. Come with me. After saying that, she turned and walked towards the illusory god palace. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Jin Yunlai had always looked down on her. It was the first time that he took the initiative to look for her like today. Moreover, why was he still walking towards the illusory god palace? Was there anything that he couldn't say here? Chu Luiyue's mind raced. Without any hesitation, she followed him. After the two left, the originally silent crowd suddenly became restless and all kinds of guesses were made. Mu Yafeng was annoyed and turned to leave. On the other side, Chu Luiyue followed Jin Yunlai all the way. Jin Yunlai didn't say anything along the way, so Chu Luiyue tactfully kept quiet. The two, one in front and one behind, arrived at the gate of the illusory god palace again. Then, Jin Yunlai turned and walked to the right. Chapter 2272. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. This was the end of the star path, and further ahead was the magnificent and sacred palace of the illusory god. Other than that, there was only the rolling mountain range behind them. They were obviously not going to the palace of the illusory god. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment, and finally asked, Seventh Oracle, where are we going now? Jin Yunlai didn't even turn his head. Fengming Mountain. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Fengming Mountain? What's that place? Jin Yunlai didn't stop walking. You'll know when we get there. His voice was as cold as ever, as if he didn't want to say more. Chu Luiyue's lips moved, and she swallowed the rest of her words. Yes. Chu Luiyue continued to follow Jin Yunlai. They were walking along the outer wall of the palace of the illusory god. Because it was still cold and cheerless, there was no one else on the wide road except for the two of them. After all, this was still the territory of the palace of the illusory god. After walking for a while, Jin Yunlai finally stopped. In front of the two of them, there was a translucent barrier that blocked the road. A faint pressure was emitted from it. Even though Chu Luiyue was already a venerable god expert, she still felt a sense of suffocation in her chest. She frowned slightly, and quietly became alert. This time, the second oracle wants to see you. You should think about what to say later. Jin Yunlai finally turned around to look at her and said indifferently. Chu Luiyue was stunned. The second oracle? This identity was already the second in command of the oracles, and even Jin Yunlai and Xu Jing had to treat him with respect. But such a person actually wanted to see her at this time? In an instant, countless guesses flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind, but her face was as calm as ever. Thank you for your guidance, Seventh Oracle. Jin Yunlai nodded when she saw that she was neither servile nor overbearing. Other than his bloodline totem, Chu Luiyue's performance in other aspects was flawless. He raised his chin. Go in. Chu Luiyue felt a little strange. The seventh oracle is not coming with us. Jin Yunlai narrowed her eyes. This is Phoenix Cry Mountain, adjacent to the Illusory God Palace, and also one of the forbidden areas of the entire Illusory God Palace. Ordinary people were not allowed to enter. He couldn't do it either. Chu Luiyue revealed a look of understanding, but secretly snorted in his heart. It turned out that this was the forbidden area that Jin Yunlai had mentioned before. However, he said that it was one of the forbidden areas. The Illusory God Palace had quite a few forbidden areas. She collected her thoughts and walked forward. She took a step forward, and her figure disappeared behind the barrier. Seeing that she had entered, Jin Yunlai frowned and remained silent for a while. He had always felt that it was inappropriate for the Yu Qian to meet Chu Luiyue here. However, the Yu Qian was the second oracle after all. In the current Illusory God Palace, he had a lot of authority. Especially now that the first oracle had been in seclusion, many things had fallen into the hands of the second oracle. Jin Yunlai suddenly remembered what Xu Jing had said before. The gate of heaven had already opened. Logically speaking, the first oracle should have come out. He pondered for a long time before turning around and leaving. At this moment, Chu Luiyue passed through the barrier and came inside. She stood still and looked forward. She was stunned. In front of her was a steep and tall mountain. However, there was not a single blade of grass on this mountain. It was just a charred and bare area. It looked as if it had just experienced a big fire. Even the area at the foot of the mountain was barren. There was no sign of life. Standing here and looking at this scene, she seemed to be able to smell the faint burning smell in the air. However, when she looked carefully, she found that many of the stones on the mountain had been polished with traces of vicissitudes. Even if something had really happened here, it did not seem to have happened recently. She suddenly thought of something and looked back. The magnificent Illusory God Palace was right behind her. However, there was a translucent barrier falling from the sky, separating the Illusory God Palace and this place. It was as if they were two different worlds. In an instant, she understood something. This so-called Feng Ming Mountain was actually the back mountain of the Illusory God Palace. The rumors that she had heard before suddenly appeared in her mind. That's right. Xiaofan once said that tens of thousands of years ago, the Illusory God Palace had experienced a big fire that almost burned half of the palace. The current Illusory God Palace took 1,000 years to repair with great difficulty. It was also at that time that the crimson gold celestial phoenix, the guardian beast of the palace, defected from the Illusory God Palace. Since then, it implicated the entire clan and became sinners. Could it be that this Feng Ming Mountain was also? It seems that you are quite interested in the Illusory God Palace. A gentle and young voice suddenly came. Chu Luiyue looked back vigilantly and saw a person coming from the scorched Feng Ming Mountain. His speed was very fast. In a few breaths, he arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. When he arrived, there was not even the slightest fluctuation of energy around him. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled. This person's strength was definitely above the god realm. She quickly sized up the man in front of her. He looked to be in his 20s, handsome and gentle. It was really hard to imagine that he was the second divine envoy who controlled the life and death of countless people. At this time, Yu Qian was also looking at her. A faint wave of emotion flashed through his eyes. Greetings, second divine envoy. Chu Luiyue bowed her head respectfully and politely. Yu Qian came back to his senses and slowly smiled. I asked you to come here today because I have something to tell you. He raised his finger and pointed at the Feng Ming Mountain behind him. Do you know where this place is? Chu Luiyue was startled. Wasn't this the Feng Ming Mountain? Where else could it be? As if seeing through her thoughts, Yu Qian smiled and said, That's right. In the past, the guardian beast of the Divine Master, the crimson gold celestial phoenix, was raised here. Chapter 2273. Divine Master. Chu Liuyue's pupils suddenly shrank. Almost instantly, she understood that the Divine Master that Yu Qian mentioned must be the true master of the palace of the illusory god. So, the crimson gold heavenly phoenix ancestor was not only the guardian beast of the palace, but also the Divine Master personally took care of it? To be able to leave the back mountain of the palace of the illusory god to it, it was enough to show the trust and love that the Divine Master had for it. But she didn't know what happened later that caused the Divine Master to betray and even directly burn down the palace of the illusory god. As it was related to the heavy secrets of the past, Chu Liyue tactfully didn't answer. Yu Qian put one hand behind his back, slightly raised his head, looked at Feng Mingshan, and sighed softly. The Divine Master treated Yi Ling very well, but unfortunately, it let the Divine Master down. Chu Liyue slightly pursed her lips. Yi Ling. This should be the name of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix ancestor. Hearing Yu Qian's words, it seemed that everything was as the rumors said back then. But who knew what the truth was? Yu Qian chuckled when he saw that she had remained silent. You don't have to be nervous. I didn't mean anything by saying this. I just felt emotional when I saw you. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. Me? What was so good about her that made him feel emotional? She wasn't naive enough to think that Yu Qian, the second divine envoy of the palace of the illusory god, was really just emotional when he mentioned the past in front of her. Such a person's scheming methods were top-notch. Even if it was a sigh, a look, it was usually full of deep meaning. If it wasn't for another purpose, he wouldn't have let her come, let alone mention these things to someone like her who didn't even have a bloodline totem. Yu Qian nodded and said, yes. Didn't you contract with the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan? His expression and eyes were clearly very gentle, as if he was chatting casually with a close friend. However, Chu Liyue clearly sensed an extremely dangerous icy aura, which instantly enveloped her. Her entire body tensed up. She looked up and fixed her gaze on Yu Qian. She felt a chill run down her spine. At this moment, even the air seemed to freeze. After a while, Chu Liyue gently nodded. Yes. I contracted a crimson gold heavenly phoenix and it has been with me for many years. Why did the second messenger suddenly ask about this? Yu Qian revealed a satisfied expression. He always liked to deal with honest people. He laughed. That's no ordinary crimson gold heavenly phoenix. You have to know that in the past 10,000 years, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan has only produced two people with the purest bloodline. One is Yi Ling, and the other is the one you contracted. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. Actually, I invited you here today to tell you something. I hope you can break the contract with that Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix. Yu Qian's tone was very calm, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. Chu Liyue noticed that he didn't have any intention of compromising in his words. The corners of her lips curled up slightly as she asked with a faint smile. Second messenger, can I say no? Yu Qian's expression was gentle. I'm afraid not. Chu Liyue shut her mouth. She knew that the other party's attitude was firm. It was useless to continue talking. The other party was the second messenger. His status and strength were much higher than hers. She didn't seem to have any conditions to negotiate with the other party. After a long while, Chu Liyue asked. Second messenger, what if I don't agree? Yu Qian said. That's a pity. I heard that Taizu of yours has a chance of breaking through to become a refining saint. And those subordinates are also quite talented. By the way, it seems that you brought your husband with you this time? Chu Liuyue's eyes turned completely cold. Master, the seventh messenger has asked the princess to leave. Yan Qing walked into the room and saw Rong Xiu sitting by the window. There was a chess set in front of him. He was holding a black chess piece between his slender fingers. He seemed to be hesitating where to put it. When he heard Yan Qing's words, he didn't even raise his head. He only said, "Yes." Yan Qing frowned slightly. After a moment of hesitation, she said, "I'm afraid that the second messenger is the one who wants to see the princess." "I know." Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows as he spoke. Then he raised his head and looked out of the window. He has always been calm. It's rare for him to lose his composure. It seems that the situation is not good. Yan Qing was even more worried. "Master, with his character, once he is forced into a corner, I'm afraid that he will do anything. When that time comes, the princess will be in even more danger. Of course he will be anxious. The gate of heaven has been open for nearly 2 months. There is not much time left for him." Rong Xiao said lightly. "Pa!" The black chess piece was placed, instantly killing the white chess piece's last chance of survival. If he wants to hit the wall, let him go. There is no need to stop him. Yan Qing was shocked. Then she suddenly realized something and nodded slightly. "Yes. Fengming Mountain." Hearing Chu Liuyue's answer, Yu Qian was not angry. Instead, he smiled slightly. After all, it is an ancient divine beast with a pure bloodline. It is normal that you are not willing to part with it. If it were me, I would not make this decision easily. How about this? I will use a condition to make an exchange with you. What do you want? Just say it. If it were others, they would probably think that Yu Qian was easy to talk to. But Chu Luyue did not think so. This made her even more vigilant. In comparison, Yu Qian had the absolute right to speak in front of her. Even if she did not agree, could Yu Qian not do anything to her? But when he heard her refusal, not only did he not force her, he even took a step back. This matter itself was full of strangeness. Seeing that Chu Luyue did not speak for a long time, Yu Qian said again, "I see that you seem to be very interested in the palace of the illusory god. If you want to come in, just nod your head. And I can guarantee that you will be treated well in the palace of the illusory god in the future." Chu Luyue smiled. The second divine envoy is right. I do want to enter the palace of the illusory god. However, as long as I finish the star path, I can achieve this goal. Why should I use dumpling to exchange? Yu Qian suddenly laughed, as if he had heard a joke. "Shengguan Yu, even if you break all the Xian formations on the star path, it is useless. Because you don't have a bloodline totem, the door of the palace of the illusory god will never open for you." Chu Luyue did not say anything. "However, if you are willing to break the contract with that crimson gold sky phoenix, I can let you have a bloodline totem. In this way, you can enter the palace of the illusory god and even become a god in the future." "Why not?" Chu Luyue was shocked. Yu Qian's words meant, "I heard that Mu Yafeng offended you before? Her bloodline power is not bad. If you don't mind, you can choose her. Of course, if you don't like her, there are many other choices in the palace of the illusory god." Yu Qian took a step forward and looked down at her with a smile on his lips. "As long as you agree to my conditions, all of this will be within your reach." Chapter 2275. If it was anyone else who spoke to Yu Qian like this, they might have already been beheaded. But Dumpling was different. Yu Qian wasn't angry when he heard this. Instead, he was curious. He sized up Dumpling for a while, and his eyes were filled with unconcealable admiration. She's not even an adult yet, but she can already take human form. She really has a pure bloodline. Previously, he had only heard about it, but now that he saw it with his own eyes, he knew how heaven-defying this crimson gold heavenly phoenix was. No wonder Yi Zhao didn't hesitate to freeze and seal the divine phoenix mountain, causing all the clansmen to fall into a deep sleep and refuse to hand her over. "Your Dumpling." The impatience and frustration in Yu Qian's heart dissipated. His voice was even gentler and more polite than when he was talking to Chu Luyue. Dumpling hugged Chu Liyue's neck tightly and was extremely vigilant. "You're not allowed to call my name." Chu Liyue patted her back lightly and wiped away the tears hanging at the corner of her eyes as she coaxed her. "Dumpling, don't cry. You won't abandon you." Dumpling pursed her lips as if she was about to cry again, but she held it in and nodded vigorously. "Yes. I want to be with you." Looking at the scene in front of him, Yu Qian frowned slightly. According to his previous plan, after letting Chu Liyue and Dumpling break the contract, he would completely cut off all contact between the two. But now, it seemed that he was facing a lot of pressure. Chu Liyue was fine, but the key was Dumpling. She was still young and only had Chu Liyue in her eyes. If he forcefully snatched her away, he was afraid that she would really do something ruthless. Absolutely not. A crimson gold heavenly phoenix with a pure bloodline was extremely rare. He had waited for so many years for this one. No matter what, there couldn't be any problems. After hesitating for a long time, he finally said, "Since you guys are so insistent, then, we'll each take a step back. From now on, you can come here once a month." "Second messenger," I said at any time. Chu Liyue emphasized. Yu Qian paused. "Half a month." Chu Liyue smiled. "Second divine envoy, you are so insincere. It is very difficult for me to agree to your request." Yu Qian gritted his teeth. It was rare for him to lose control like this, but the woman in front of him was really, the two sides were in a deadlock for a long time. Finally, Yu Qian said, "Good. I promise you." In any case, Fengming Mountain was surrounded by a barrier, and there weren't many people here. If she wanted to come, she could just come. What could she possibly do? However, I have to warn you in advance. Phoenix Cry Mountain was a holy land for cultivation for crimson gold heavenly phoenixes. However, this was not the case for the human race. If you insist on coming, I won't stop you as long as you can handle it. Yu Qian said in a deep voice. The corner of Chu Liyue's lips curled up. "You don't have to worry about that." Yu Qian looked at her deeply. However, she had already looked at Dumpling in her arms and comforted her softly. "Dumpling, don't be afraid. Just treat it as a change of place to cultivate. In any case, I will often come over to accompany you." Bean-sized crystal tears rolled down from Dumpling's eyes again. Her small body was sobbing, but she didn't say anything else. She only nodded her head while choking with sobs. All right. She knew that this was the best choice for the current situation. Chu Liyue kissed the space between her eyebrows with heartache. "Dumpling, be good." Seeing this, the Yu Qian didn't say anything else. With a wave of his sleeve, a palm-sized white jade token flew out. "This is my token. If you want to come to Fengming Mountain in the future, you can use this." Chu Liyue caught the white jade token. "Thank you, second messenger." "No need." Yu Qian raised his chin. "Now, you can cancel the contract." Hearing this, Dumpling instantly hugged Chu Liyue even tighter. Chu Liyue coaxed her for a while more before Dumpling reluctantly let go and stood in front of her. The two of them faced each other. Chu Liyue looked deeply at Dumpling, then closed his eyes. She gently raised her hand, and a scarlet gold light suddenly flew out from her palm, heading straight for Dumpling. Dumpling's small shoulders trembled, and she also stretched out her hand with red eyes. The same ray of light flew out from her hand. The two rays of light converged and connected in midair, and the pressure was faintly discernible. Yu Qian watched from the side, his eyes moving slightly. The aura of the purest bloodline was indeed different. Even Yi Zhao, who had opened his seventh meridian, could not be compared to it. Although he had been checkmated by Chu Liyue, it was all worth it. Bang! A faint shattering sound was heard. The two rays of light that were connected to each other were also annihilated. Yu Qian's heart settled. In this way, the contract between Chu Luyue and Dumpling was completely cancelled. He lifted his leg and walked forward. Dumpling, follow me. As he spoke, he had already reached out his hand. However, at this moment, his expression suddenly froze. A rune gradually flashed between Dumpling's brows. Immediately after, a familiar aura came from her body. When he saw this, Yu Qian's brows furrowed tightly. He quickly turned around and looked at Chu Luyue. His gaze was cold and sharp like a knife. When it landed on a person's body, it was almost bone-piercing. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately looked up. Their gazes met, and in an instant, sparks seemed to fly in all directions. Yu Qian's gaze was solid, and it carried a powerful pressure that crushed over. He asked word by word, Shangguanyu, is your contract really cancelled? Chu Luyue's heart instantly tightened. Digression, 6 p.m. Chapter 2276. After a short moment of silence, she said, of course. She and Dumpling didn't have an ordinary contract to begin with. Now that she said it was cancelled, it was just to save some face. Could the Yu Qian really see something? Then what's with the aura in her body? The Yu Qian's eyes were full of scrutinizing pressure as he stared at Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue's eyebrows twitched slightly. Just as he was about to ask, Dumpling asked crisply, hey, are you talking about this? The Yu Qian turned around and saw Dumpling pointing at the gradually fading totem between her eyebrows and asked. That's right. The Yu Qian replied affirmatively, but his eyes were still full of suspicion. If the contract between the two of you has really been cancelled, why is there still this aura left? This is clearly a special power that the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix has after contracting with a human. Although ordinary Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenixes inherited a certain amount of bloodline power, they wouldn't have such an aura. But Dumpling had it at this moment. Hearing this answer, Chu Luyue and Dumpling quickly looked at each other and exchanged glances. His explanation was very interesting. Since this aura was only produced when the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix contracted with a human, how did he know? Seeing how confident he was, he must have seen it before. Then, there was only one explanation: the ancestor of the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix, Yi Ling, had a contract with the God Master of the Palace of the Illusory God. So now, he began to suspect Dumpling. Understanding this point, Chu Luyue looked at Dumpling and blinked gently. Dumpling's heart lit up, and she immediately took out a crimson gold feather. I think it should be because of the ancestor's golden feather, right? Seeing Dumpling take out the ancestor's golden feather, a trace of shock flashed across the Yu Qian's face. Why do you have this? Of course it's because I'm the young master. Dumpling rolled her eyes and carefully put away the ancestor's golden feather. If it's not with me, do you think it's with you? She hated Yu Qian to the core, so she didn't hold back when she spoke. However, Yu Qian didn't have the time to care about this. He frowned doubtfully and looked at Dumpling. The aura he had sensed earlier was indeed the same as the aura on the ancestor's golden feather. Could it be that I was wrong? After all, Dumpling had the purest bloodline, so it was reasonable for her to obtain the ancestor's golden feather. Back then, he had asked Di Zhao for it, but he didn't manage to get it. It turned out that she was with Dumpling. Tuanzi's big eyes and the tip of her nose were still red. She sniffled and continued to complain. You've already separated me from Yu. What other contract can I have? His words were still filled with anger and dissatisfaction. Yu Qian gradually dispelled the doubts in his heart, and his expression eased. That's for the best. You have the purest bloodline. That kind of contract will only hinder your breakthrough. As he said that, he raised his chin. Let's go back to Fengming Mountain. After that, you'll be staying here most of the time. Dumpling looked at Chu Luyue eagerly. I want you to go with me. Yu Qian paused. He wanted to directly refuse, but seeing that Dumpling was still agitated, he finally nodded and snorted. All right. As long as she can go up, I won't stop her. With that, he tapped the tip of his foot and took the lead to rush towards Fengming Mountain. On the other hand, Tuanzi turned around, ran over, and hugged Chu Liuyue's leg with its shiny little feet. Ah, you, come with me. Chu Liuyue bent down and picked her up. All right. In any case, she would come here many times in the future. She would first go and take a look at the situation on Fengming Mountain. Dumpling hugged her and snuggled into her embrace, her face full of reluctance. Chu Liuyue patted her back and rushed towards Yu Qian. Very quickly, Chu Liuyue understood why Yu Qian said those words. On Fengming Mountain, there was an extremely powerful pressure. She had only gotten a little closer when she felt as if her chest was being pressed down by something. She felt stuffy and her speed also decreased. A transparent heat wave swept over from the mountain. It was scorching hot. Chu Liuyue's forehead was quickly covered in sweat. His back was also quickly drenched in sweat, and then quickly evaporated. Yu Qian turned around to look. Seeing her reaction, he sneered in his heart. The fire that year on Fengming Mountain had directly burned down the entire back mountain. Even though so many years had passed, every inch of land and every piece of rock still retained traces of what had happened back then. Back then, Yi Ling's 9 meridians had all been opened, and his strength was unparalleled. Even though he had been dead for many years, his power was still there. Even he didn't come here often. Not to mention a god like Chu Liuyue. About 15 minutes later, Yu Qian arrived at the peak of Fengming Mountain. He stood with his hands behind his back and waited for another 15 minutes before Chu Liuyue and Dumpling finally arrived. The moment her feet landed on the mountain, Chu Liuyue's eyebrows twitched, and she summoned her divine body almost immediately. A layer of beautiful soft armor quickly covered her body. With the divine body as a barrier, the burning sensation was finally reduced by a lot. Are you alright? Dumpling asked worriedly. Chu Liuyue shook her head. I'm fine. Because she was worried that she would reveal something in front of Yu Qian, she had stopped borrowing Dumpling's power from just now. That was why it took her a lot of effort to come here. However, as long as she could hide it from Yu Qian, it was all worth it. Dumpling jumped down from her arms. She was barefooted, and her small, white feet stepped on the scorched mountain rocks. Not only did she not look like she was in pain, but she even widened her eyes slightly as she tugged at the corner of Chu Liuyue's shirt and muttered, I'm sorry. Ah you, it's so comfortable here. Chu Liuyue felt relieved. It was fine as long as Dumpling was fine. Yu Qian chuckled at the side. The rocks on the back mountain were specially gathered by the Divine Master for Yi Ling back then. Not only can they nourish his body, but they can also increase his cultivation speed. Naturally, other places can't compare to them. If it were an ordinary crimson gold heavenly phoenix, they wouldn't be able to withstand it here. However, Dumpling has the purest bloodline, so she won't have this problem. This was why he had to choose this place to meet Chu Liuyue. Fengming Mountain was originally prepared for Dumpling. Hearing his words, Dumpling curled her lips. No matter how good the place is, it has already been burned down. What's there to cherish? She still liked to be with Yu. Yi Zhao knew that she was extremely dependent on Chu Liuyue and couldn't change it in a short time, so he didn't pay much attention to it. In any case, Chu Liuyue wouldn't come often in the future. As time passed, the relationship between Dumpling and her would naturally fade. Dumpling, you can cultivate here in the future. Yu Qian's lips curled up. With your talent, it won't be long before you open your 7th meridian. In the future, it won't even be a problem for you to open your 9th meridian. Chapter 2277. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. The Yu Qian's words, it was as if he really hoped that Dumpling could open her meridians as soon as possible. This was the same as the owner of the eye from before. That person was obviously not the Yu Qian, but there must be some unknown relationship between the two. Otherwise, that I wouldn't have been able to summon the illusory god palace back in the Red Moon Desert. Even if it was just an illusion, it was enough to explain the problem. They wanted Dumpling to open her meridians, and even hoped that she would open her 9th meridian. Back then, Yi Ling had opened all 9 meridians, but didn't he betray the illusory god palace? After that, the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan was directly labeled as a sinful clan. Even Yi Zhao was captured and tortured. But Yu Qian's current attitude towards Dumpling was truly suspicious. Dumpling ignored Yu Qian. "You, can you accompany me to take a look around?" Chu Liyue rubbed her head. "All right." With that, the two of them walked to the side. Fengming Mountain was steep and towering. Although the top of the mountain was bare, it still contained an extremely shocking amount of power. To Dumpling, it was indeed the best place to cultivate. Walking on the charred mountain rocks, Chu Liyue's emotions churned as countless thoughts flashed through his mind. All of a sudden, Tuanzi pulled her hand and said, "You, it's so quiet here. I don't like it." At first, she did feel that this place was very suitable for cultivation, but after staying here for a long time, she felt that this place was too deserted. In the future, when Yu wasn't around, wouldn't it be boring for her to be alone? Without waiting for Chu Liyue to speak, Yu Qian took the initiative and said, "If you want to be more lively, the illusory god palace also has a lot of divine beasts. I can get them to accompany you." Chu Liyue frowned slightly. "Second divine envoy, this Fengming Mountain. I'm afraid ordinary divine beasts won't be able to stay here, right?" Yu Qian said softly, "It doesn't matter, as long as Dumpling likes it." Dumpling glared at him. "I don't like it. Wouldn't it be terrible if those magical beasts all died after coming here?" Chu Liyue pinched Dumpling's little face. Dumpling is not angry. There is no sign of life here. It is indeed a bit desolate. How about this? I will leave the 2 Tian baby to you. Dumpling was stunned. Really? Chu Liyue nodded and took out a 2 Tian baby. He bent down and placed it in Dumpling's chubby little hand. The heaven and earth energy here is abundant. It's just right for me to raise it. Dumpling blinked and nodded vigorously. Good. In the future, you should come often too. After getting Chu Liyue's affirmative answer, Dumpling ran to the side, picked up a stone, and threw it at the ground. Bang! A hole suddenly appeared on the mountain rock. Yu Qian's eyebrows twitched. Fengming Mountain was extremely difficult to shake. Tens of thousands of years of wind and rain had not left many traces on it. Dumpling just casually threw a stone, and it actually, Dumpling buried the 2 Tian baby, revealing only the 2 tender leaves at the top, gently swaying in the wind. That's good. Dumpling clapped her hands in satisfaction. She heard that 2 Tian baby could grow up, so it was very suitable to raise it here. Yu Qian glanced at the 2 Tian baby, but didn't care too much about it. It was just a small toy for Dumpling to relieve her boredom. Chu Liyue wiped the sweat on her forehead that was still dripping down. Dumpling, I will go back first today. I will come to see you tomorrow. Hearing that, Tuanzi ran over and hugged her reluctantly. Then you must come tomorrow. Chu Liyue smiled lightly. Yes. Then, she took a deep breath and said goodbye to Yu Qian. Yu Qian was naturally happy about her departure. He didn't try to persuade her to stay and directly agreed. However, perhaps it was because Chu Liyue was still cooperative with Dumpling's matter, or because Dumpling was still here, Yu Qian's attitude was still considered polite. After giving a few more instructions to Dumpling, Chu Liyue left. After her figure disappeared into the distance, Yu Qian looked at Dumpling. Dumpling turned her back and sat down in front of the two Tian baby. Her entire body was filled with disgust for him. Yu Qian didn't mind. As long as she could open her meridians as soon as possible, nothing else mattered. Yu Qian also left quickly. Dumpling was the only one left in the huge Fengming mountain. Her cheeks puffed up in anger as she wiped away the tears hanging from the corner of her eyes and snorted softly. Acting was really not easy. When he got back, he would ask Yu for double the kisses. After Chu Luyue came out of the barrier, she went straight to her residence. When she returned to the courtyard, it was already very late. Just as she arrived at the door, it opened from the inside. Rong Xiao was standing behind the door. There was a faint smile on his elegant face. "You're back." In an instant, Chu Luyue's tense mind finally relaxed, and a strong sense of fatigue quickly surged up. During this period of time, she had experienced too many things. Previously, the string in her mind had always been taut, but now that she saw Rong Xiao, she finally let go of her guard. She took a step forward and threw herself into Rong Xiao's arms. Leaning against his firm and warm chest, she could even hear the powerful beating of his heart. A familiar cold fragrance wrapped around her. She took a deep breath and hugged his lean waist tightly with both arms. She leaned her head against his chest and rubbed against it. Rong Xiao's heart instantly softened. He wrapped his arms around her shoulders and pulled her into his embrace. Rong Xiao, she muttered softly. In an instant, a cold light flashed across his eyes as he asked softly, "Who bullied my Yu?" Chapter 2278. Chu Luyue shook her head. "It's fine, it's just that Dumpling was left at Fengming Mountain." Even though she had used all sorts of methods to deceive Yu Qian, she still worried about Dumpling when she thought about how she would be alone for a long time. Rong Xiao kissed her forehead. "Let's talk inside." On the other side, Jin Yunlai returned to the illusory god palace after sending Chu Luyue to Fengming Mountain. When he passed by the Black Jade Square, his footsteps paused. Two people were standing not far from the square, whispering something. He knew the man on the left, Kong Qinglin. He was the only refining saint that had appeared in the illusory god palace in recent years. He had just broken through and entered the illusory god palace not long ago. It wasn't strange that he would appear here. But the woman next to him, she was wearing a long dress with an exquisite forehead band. Her black hair fell to her ankles. She had a slender figure and a gentle face. Jin Yunlai didn't have any impression of her. There was no such person in the illusory god palace. "So, if I want to become a refining saint, I have to fight for a ray of holy light from here?" she asked softly. She was gentle, making people feel like they were bathed in a spring breeze. Kong Qinglin nodded. "That's right. This piece of primal chaos holy jade has appeared here tens of thousands of years ago. It can be considered the most precious treasure of the illusory god palace. It contains thousands of holy lights and has boundless power. As long as you can successfully summon a ray of holy light, you can successfully refine a saint artifact." As he spoke, he looked at Su Li curiously. "Speaking of which, I haven't asked yet. You said that you just came up from the Divine Ruins world, but when you came, you were already a refining saint. What's going on? The holy light in it won't leave the illusory god palace." In other words, it was impossible for a refining saint to appear in the Divine Ruins world below. Hearing Kong Qinglin's words, Jin Yunlai immediately understood. It turned out that this was the refining saint that Chu Luyue wanted to invite. He leaned to the side and listened attentively. In fact, he also wanted to know what was going on. Su Li smiled faintly and explained, "Actually, I didn't break through just now. About 10,000 years ago, I was refining a weapon when a strange phenomenon occurred in the sky. A shield flew down. I don't know how, but I managed to successfully forge a saint artifact. Shield? Kong Qinglin was stunned. Yes. It's... Su Li raised her hand and pointed forward. Its shape seems to be similar to the missing piece in the middle. Kong Qinglin immediately understood. I see, Su Li sighed softly. Unfortunately, the power contained in the shield was too shocking. After I finished refining the saint artifact, I also died, leaving behind only a remnant of my soul. It wasn't easy for me to revive. Only when I came here did I realize that the shield actually flew out from the illusory god palace. The corners of her lips curved slightly as she spoke softly. I don't know how this happened. Kong Qinglin's lips moved as if he wanted to say something. 10,000 years ago, it was probably because of that riot. But this matter was forbidden in the illusory god palace, so he naturally couldn't say it. Su Li glanced at him, her eyes flashing slightly as she smiled and said, "Right, I heard that there hasn't been a refining saint in the illusory god palace for many years. It's really amazing that you were able to succeed." Hearing this, Kong Qinglin stroked his beard and laughed. Not at all. Compared to you, Su Li, I'm still a bit lacking. Although he said that, it was clear that Kong Qinglin acknowledged and was proud of this matter. Of course, he had the qualifications to do so. Su Li asked curiously, "Actually, I don't understand. Logically speaking, in a place like the illusory god palace where geniuses and experts gather, there should be many who can break through to the refining saint realm. Why is it that you're the only one in all these years?" Kong Qinglin subconsciously said, "Naturally, it's because of this primal chaos sacred jade." His voice suddenly stopped. Su Li had already guessed something. Because of that missing piece? Kong Qinglin looked at Su Li with some hesitation, then nodded and said in a low voice, "Everyone in the illusory god palace has a tacit understanding of this matter, and very few people have mentioned it in these years. It's only because you're new and have a connection with that piece of chaos black jade that I'm telling you. But it's better not to mention it in the future." Su Li was about to ask again when she suddenly heard footsteps behind her. The two turned around at the same time. Seeing who it was, Kong Qinglin was startled and quickly bowed. "Greetings, seventh divine emissary." Su Li was startled. So the person in front of her was the seventh divine emissary? This name was like a thunderclap reverberating in the ears. She originally thought that she would see him when she came to the heavenly gate, but for some reason, the seventh divine emissary didn't appear that day. Today was the first time she officially met this person. Su Li greets the seventh divine emissary. Countless thoughts flashed through her mind, but Su Li's face was still calm and gentle as usual. Jin Yunlai looked at her coldly. To be able to become a refining saint in the divine ruins world, you do have some ability. However, this is the illusory god palace. If you want to stay here in the future, you'd better be careful with your words and actions. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask, understand? Was this a warning to her not to continue inquiring about what happened in the past? Su Li's mind raced, but her face revealed a bit of nervousness and she slightly lowered her head. Yes. Kong Qinglin's heart also hung in the air. Of course, he knew that those words couldn't be said carelessly, but seeing that Su Li was really curious, he couldn't hold back and said it. Who knew that the seventh divine emissary was here? He must have heard everything. However, just as Kong Qinglin was nervous and worried, thinking that he was going to be punished, Jin Yunlai didn't say anything more and turned to leave. Hearing the footsteps gradually fade away, Su Li gently sighed and muttered softly. "It seems that in this illusory god palace, I really have to be careful everywhere." Kong Qinglin's back was already soaked with sweat. A gentle breeze blew, and a chill went straight to the top of his head. Thank goodness, he wiped the sweat from his forehead with lingering fear. "Su Li, don't talk about these things in the future. The seventh divine emissary probably saw that it was your first mistake today, so he let you off. If you do it again in the future, it won't be so easy. Su Li looked at his reaction thoughtfully. Is the seventh divine emissary very strict? He had only said a few words, but Kong Qinglin was already so nervous. Kong Qinglin smiled bitterly. Not at all the divine emissaries are like this. After all, it's related to the past, forget it. Don't mention it in the future to avoid causing trouble for yourself. Su Li blinked her eyes and smiled gently. Okay. On the other side, Jin Yunlai wanted to go back to his residence directly, but halfway there, he suddenly remembered what happened today. He turned around and walked in another direction. Chapter 2279. He walked forward and finally arrived at the door of a courtyard. The courtyard was quiet, and there was no sound at all. Looking in from the outside, one could see a thick pile of fallen leaves in the courtyard. It was as if no one had lived here for many years, and it was lonely and cold. Jin Yunlai raised his hand and knocked on the door. Knock knock. First Oracle, Yunlai requests an audience. He spoke loudly. However, after waiting for a while, there was no response from inside. Jin Yunlai frowned slightly and increased the strength of his hand. Knock knock. First Oracle, I have something important to report to you. Still, there was silence. Jin Yunlai waited for a while, and his eyes flashed with determination. Then, he took a step forward and was about to push the door open and enter. However, at this moment, an extremely powerful aura suddenly came from inside. Jin Yunlai was shocked and immediately retreated without thinking. However, he was fast, but the other party's attack was faster. Bang! He could not dodge in time and was hit in the chest by the force, and he fell heavily to the ground. Pfft! Jin Yunlai's chest shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He clutched his chest and stared at the door in shock. First Oracle, Jin Yunlai, you're too presumptuous. A cold voice came out from inside. It was like a fierce wind and frost that instantly caused Jin Yunlai to freeze on the spot. He forcefully swallowed the strong taste of blood and endured the pain in his body. He quickly got up and bowed respectfully. Yunlai did not mean to offend you. Please forgive me, First Oracle. His heart almost stopped beating at this moment, and the blood in his body instantly froze. The First Oracle's position in the palace of the illusory god was extremely respected. Not to mention the others, even the remaining divine envoys had no choice but to wait obediently. Now, he had tried to barge in, which was a serious crime. After a while, the voice continued to come from inside. Do you know who you are suspecting? Jin Yunlai was shocked and immediately knelt on one knee. Yunlai knows his mistake. Bang! His knee landed heavily on the ground, making people's scalps go numb. This time, it almost made people think that his knees were going to shatter because of this. The courtyard fell into silence once more. Jin Yunlai's heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something, and she didn't dare to breathe. An extreme sense of unease welled up in his heart. He rarely felt this way. But now, he was facing the first divine envoy. The reason why he did what he did just now was because he was suspicious of the First Oracle. For so many years, the first divine emissary had never stepped out of the courtyard. Xu Jing and the others had repeatedly requested to see him, but he had never agreed. Until now, even the authority of Fengming Mountain had been completely handed over to the second divine envoy. Jin Yunlai did not understand. Why did the First Oracle give him all his authority? Why did he stay in this small courtyard and refuse to come out? He could not help doubting it. Therefore, the reason why he took the risk earlier was to test the waters. What was certain was that the first divine envoy was indeed inside. And his strength seemed to have improved compared to before. Just now, if he wanted to, Jin Yunlai's life and death would be in his hands. There won't be a next time. After a long time, the voice finally sounded again. Jin Yunlai let out a long sigh of relief. "Thank you, First Divine Envoy." He bowed respectfully and slowly got up. "Yunlai will take his leave." There was no response from inside. Jin Yunlai turned around and left. However, just as he took a step, he suddenly paused. After hesitating for a while, he finally turned around and looked at the tightly shut courtyard door. "First Divine Envoy, are you really at ease to entrust Fengming Mountain to the second Divine Envoy? He invited Shengguan Yu over today." After a pause, he said again, "If everything goes smoothly, the young master of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan will stay in Fengming Mountain from now on. He has his reasons for doing so." The voice was calm, as if he didn't care too much. Since he's in charge of Fengming Mountain now, he can naturally make the decision. If you have any objections, you can directly talk to him. There's no need to come here. But, Jin Yunlai wanted to say something but hesitated. But these should be the matters of the First Divine Envoy. He knew what these things meant, but he didn't seem to have any intention of making a move. Could it be that this was his intention all along? Jin Yunlai couldn't figure it out. No matter what, he couldn't go to the second Divine Envoy. After so long, he knew very well what kind of person the Yu Qian was. He usually seemed gentle, but in reality, he was extremely strong. If anyone dared to oppose his decision, he would definitely be dissatisfied. Only the First Divine Envoy could restrain him a little, but now the First Divine Envoy didn't seem to have any intention of interfering. What had the First Divine Envoy been busy with all these years? If it was in the past, he would definitely not let the Yu Qian do as he pleased. But it seemed that the First Divine Envoy wouldn't see him today. Jin Yunlai clenched his fists and stood there for a long time before finally bowing slightly. Yunlai understands. After saying that, he finally left. After he left, the courtyard once again fell into silence. A wind blew, sweeping up the broken leaves in the courtyard, revealing a murderous aura. Suddenly, something seemed to be moving under the pile of leaves. That voice came again. "I know you want to go to Fengming Mountain, but now is not the time." The commotion under the pile of leaves finally died down. Jin Yunlai raised his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His expression had returned to normal. Although what he did just now was dangerous, he didn't regret it. At the very least, it dispelled the doubts in his heart. Although he still didn't know what the First Divine Envoy was planning, he could finally feel at ease. If he didn't want to see him, then so be it. Thinking of this, his hanging heart could be considered to have settled down. Suddenly, a figure hurriedly walked past him. Jin Yunlai was suddenly stunned. Xu Jing? Shouldn't she be at Herb Mountain at this time? What was she doing in such a hurry? Jin Yunlai looked in her direction and frowned slightly. Sixth Divine Envoy? She arrived in front of a courtyard and pushed open the door with ease. Then, she went straight into the room. As soon as she entered, a faint smell of blood assaulted her nose. She frowned slightly and immediately turned around to close the door. The doors and windows of the room were tightly shut, and it was very dark. Coupled with the smell, it was even more uncomfortable. Although she had been here several times, she was still not used to it. Xu Jing calmed herself down and bowed in the direction of the screen. Sixth Divine Envoy, I'm here. A moment later, a hoarse voice sounded. Put everything down. Yes. Xu Jing responded, took out a jade box, and placed it on the table next to her. Chapter 2280. There was a hint of displeasure in that coarse and hoarse voice. Only one? Xu Jing said, after all, this is a medicine at the level of a medical sage. It's extremely difficult to refine. The man chuckled. But it's been many years since you became a medical sage. I can only say that your skills haven't improved much over the years. Xu Jing's expression stiffened for a moment, and a cold look flashed across her eyes. No one liked being said such things, let alone Xu Jing. It's extremely difficult to improve after becoming a medical sage. You can't say that. The person who was in charge of the herb mountain was much more efficient than you after becoming a medical sage. Xu Jing's expression turned completely cold. Sixth Divine Emissary, if you're not satisfied with me, you can find someone else to help you. She wanted to know who else in the illusory god palace could help her. That voice laughed softly. Why are you in such a hurry? Anyway, the herb mountain is already yours, and no one will fight with you for it. Then, a black rope flew out from behind the screen and took the jade box away. Xu Jing stood with her hands by her side and said coldly, "How do you know? What's more, my authority over the herb mountain has been revoked. How can this herb mountain be considered mine? I heard about this, and it's indeed a bit sudden. But you can't completely blame others for this. Who told you not to restrain yourself before? If you weren't so anxious, you probably wouldn't have fallen to this state." Xu Jing didn't want to talk about this. Her mood was already bad enough, and she couldn't bear to hear other people's criticism. Sixth Divine Emissary, if you have the time and energy, you should think more about yourself. Xu Jing said coldly. Even with the help of my pill, it's still very difficult for you to reconstruct your divine body. The voice behind the screen was silent for a while. Of course I know that. Xu Jing's eyes flashed slightly, and she asked tentatively, "Actually, I haven't asked you before, but your injuries, what's going on?" To be able to injure the sixth divine emissary to such an extent, it was obvious that the opponent wasn't an ordinary person. However, the sixth divine emissary did not seem to have any intention of telling her this. "It's all in the past anyway. There's no point in telling you." Xu Jing was really curious, but she couldn't get anything out of the sixth oracle, so she could only change the topic. "By the way, do you know what happened to the first oracle recently? The gate of heaven had been open for 2 months, but he had not stepped out of the gate even once. I went to ask for an audience, but I never received permission. The matters of the first divine envoy are not something you and I can interfere with. If you have the time, you should go back and think about how to improve your strength." Before Xu Jing could finish, the voice inside the room interrupted him in a hurry. He spoke very quickly and his tone was tense. It was very different from usual, as if it was filled with deep fear. Xu Jing frowned. Although the divine envoys were extremely respectful to the first divine envoy, it didn't seem to be to such an extent, right? Why did the sixth divine emissary change so much when he returned this time? She pursed her lips and took a step forward. "Mo Shiqian, do you know something? That's how it is." In the room, Chu Luyue briefly explained the matter to Rongxiu. "That second divine envoy is very domineering. If I don't agree, I'm afraid I won't be able to leave Fengming Mountain today." Rongxiu nodded. Chu Luyue continued, "Speaking of which, I've never heard of the first divine envoy. This matter involves the divine beast guarding the palace. I thought that the first divine envoy should be in charge." Sun Yi, who was walking to the door, stopped in his tracks. Digression, 6:00. Chapter 2281. However, this pause was only for a moment, and he quickly returned to normal and entered the room. "Master, Your Highness." Seeing Sun Yi enter, Chu Luyue nodded slightly. "Perhaps the first divine emissary is busy with other things," Rongxiu said indifferently. "The second divine emissary status is only second to him, so it's not strange for him to be personally in charge of this matter. I'm just curious." Chu Luyue tapped her fingers on the armrest of the chair. "They seem to want Dumpling to open her meridians as soon as possible. Previously in the Red Moon Desert, the owner of that eye clearly had the same thoughts. He even tried his best to capture Dumpling and forcefully open her meridians. This time, although the second divine emissary, Yu Qian, did not use such cruel methods, from a certain perspective, he still coerced her and Dumpling. Fortunately, the contract between her and Dumpling had already been changed. Otherwise, she really didn't know how to get through this. Chu Luyue also had her own plans. There was another important reason why she was willing to go with the flow. If Dumpling could open her seventh meridian, there was hope of saving Yizhao. Although Fengming Mountain had been burned down, it was still a holy land for cultivation for the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Especially Dumpling. She had the same pure bloodline as her ancestor and had the ancestor's golden feather in her hands. Obviously, staying at Fengming Mountain would greatly increase her cultivation speed. Lu Yu. At this moment, Mu Hongyu rushed in from outside. Lu Yu, you're back. Chu Luyue collected her thoughts and looked up. Seeing Mu Hongyu's excited expression, she couldn't help but ask, Hongyu, what's wrong? Mu Hongyu ran over and saw Rongxiu and Sun Yi in the room. She coughed. I have something to tell you. Chu Luyue nodded. Just say it. Rongxiu and Sun Yi were the people she trusted the most. Mu Hongyu hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She walked closer and said softly, Lu Yu, there seems to be something wrong with the sea outside the illusory god palace. Chu Luyue's heart stirred as he glanced at Sun Yi. Sun Yi nodded and walked over to close the door. He then raised his hand to set up a barrier, isolating all sounds. Chu Luyue asked again. What did you find? Mu Hongyu's hands were twisted into a ball. She was a little conflicted. I think Master might be under that sea. Chu Luyue's eyes flickered. How can you tell? Did you notice something? Mu Hongyu sighed and explained. Actually, when I came that day, I felt that the sea was a little strange, but I didn't take it to heart at that time. I've been thinking about it for the past few days and finally noticed something strange. Lu Yu, the spatial power under that sea is very complicated. It seems to be Master's work. Chu Luyue was stunned. The reason why she guessed that Diwu Zhangze was imprisoned under that sea was because she heard a faint painful groan when she left last time. That voice was definitely Diwu Zhangze's. She couldn't have heard wrongly. When Mu Hongyu came to say that there was something wrong with that sea, she thought that she had encountered the same situation as her. She didn't expect, you can sense the changes in the spatial power below? Mu Hongyu nodded and gestured with her hands. That's right. Under normal circumstances, the spatial power above and below the sea should be about the same. But when we passed over the sea that day, I discovered that there seemed to be several forces intertwining with each other. It was extremely chaotic. Later on, when I thought about it, it was indeed a mark that Master deliberately left behind. Other than him, I don't know anyone else who can do such a thing. She furrowed her brows nervously. But this is only my guess. I have to go down and see for myself whether it's true or not. I just feel a little uneasy, so I came over to tell you. There's no need to guess. It should be true. Chu Luyue softly interrupted her. Then, she briefly recounted what happened earlier. I was only suspecting it at first. But if even you say so, then this matter is most likely true. The room fell into a short dead silence. Mu Hongyu finally came back to her senses. But, who exactly did Master offend to be imprisoned under that sea? Anyone who had been to that sea knew what kind of shocking and ferocious power was hidden in the surging waves. Once a high god powerhouse fell into it, there would be nothing left of him in a few breaths' time. He wouldn't even have the time to struggle and ask for help. Even if Diwu Zhangze was stronger, he would definitely be tortured inhumanly if he was imprisoned in that place. Chu Luyue didn't say anything. She had the same question in her mind. Not only Diwu Zhangze, but also Dugu Mabao and Lan Shao. The three of them were first trapped in the Red Moon Desert and didn't see the light of day for tens of thousands of years. Then, they were brought here and imprisoned separately. It wasn't that she didn't have any guesses. Dugu Mabao and the other two must have some kind of relationship with the illusory god palace or the illusory god palace. Because of some reason, they were punished like this. But now that she didn't have any more clues or evidence, she naturally couldn't make any guesses. Mu Hongyu suddenly grabbed her hand and whispered, "Don't worry. Luyu, I want to go down to that sea to take a look." Chu Luyue frowned. "Now?" Mu Hongyu nodded. "But you're still a high god. If you go down rashly, I'm afraid, Master left a space under the sea. I can go there." Mu Hongyu said. Chu Luyue's eyes lit up. "Really?" Mu Hongyu nodded. "So, the only problem now is that it's a bit difficult to get out of the Heavenly Gate. The Heavenly Gate of the illusory god palace was heavily guarded. It was almost impossible to leave quietly." Chu Luyue thought for a while and said, "It's not difficult to get out. The difficult part is, how to not be discovered. Since Diwu Zhangze was imprisoned there must be someone secretly watching over him." Rong Xiu suddenly said, "If your incorporeal body breaks through again, you'll be able to fool everyone." Chapter 2282. Mu Hongyu looked at Rong Xiu in surprise. "Your Highness, do you mean, Senior Diwu was in the Mahayana realm of the void body back then? Now that you're only in the minor realization realm, you naturally have many limitations. If you can break through to the Mahayana realm, you can cross all space barriers. At that time, not only will you be able to see Senior Diwu, but it's also possible to take him away quietly." Rong Xiu explained calmly. Chu Luyue widened her eyes slightly. "Rong Xiu, how, do you know all this? Mahayana realm, minor realization realm." She had never heard of it before. But looking at him, he seemed to know a lot about it. Rong Xiu smiled. "When I sent Senior Diwu's aura back, he told me all this." Chu Luyue blinked. "Really? But I was in the Red Moon Desert for so long, and he never mentioned it." Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure you had time to listen to him?" Chu Luyue's lips twitched. "No, at that time, she spent all her time and energy on those Xian formations and prescriptions. She worked so hard, but she still received criticism and disdain from Big Bao several times. Lan Xiao and Diwu Zhangze couldn't even get a word in at that time, so how could they say all this?" At first, the two of them tried to speak up for Chu Luyue and let her relax a little, but Big Bao rebuked them with a few cold words. So in the end, the two of them ran away, leaving only the words, "Good luck," for her. Just thinking about it made her sad. Chu Luyue rubbed between her eyebrows. "That's true." Mu Hongyu looked conflicted. "But, even the minor realization realm took me a lot of effort to break through. The Mahayana realm is simply out of reach. I'm afraid I won't be able to break through in such a short time." Previously, with Diwu Zhangze's guidance, she could still improve faster, but now, she was almost fumbling around on her own. Rong Xiu paused. "Although the void physique is rare in the Divine Ruins world, I've heard that several Mahayana realm powerhouses have appeared in the illusory god palace. If he could obtain the incantations they left behind, he should be able to rapidly increase his cultivation." Mu Hongyu was dumbfounded. "But where can we find such a thing?" Chu Luyue suddenly said, "I know where it is. Treasure Pavilion." Mingshu raised his head in surprise. "You want the Mahayana cultivation method?" Chu Luyue nodded. "Does the Treasure Pavilion have this item?" Mingshu immediately smiled. "Of course we do. It's just that it's been a long time since a cultivator with the void physique appeared in the Illusion God Palace. That's why the second boss ordered us to put these things away. If you want it, I can help you find it." Chu Luyue heaved a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Lord Ming." Mingshu smiled. There's no need to thank me. However, Miss Shangwan, you don't seem to have the void physique. Did you ask for this lady? As he spoke, his eyes fell on Mu Hongyu, who was standing beside Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue didn't deny it and nodded with a smile. Yes. Ming Shu said, He, please wait here for a while. I'll go up and get it for you. With that, he turned and went up to the second floor. On the huge first floor of the treasure pavilion, only Chu Luyue and Mu Hongyu were left. Mu Hongyu's eyes widened, and she curiously scanned her surroundings. She was shocked. Lu Yu, there's a lot of good stuff here. She only took a cursory glance and saw many treasures that were rarely seen in the outside world. Chu Luyue smiled. This is the largest store in the Illusion God Palace. There are countless collections, so it's naturally unusual. Mu Hongyu nodded in understanding, but her eyes were still filled with shock. However, this store is really interesting. It has the same name as Yao Chen's store. What a coincidence. I was also quite surprised when I first came here. However, most of the names of these stores are very similar, so it's not strange to have the same name. That's true. Mu Hongyu rubbed her chin. Yao Chen's store is worlds apart from this one. By the way, Lu Yu, I saw that Lord Ming's attitude towards you was really good. Didn't they say that even the divine envoys were afraid of the treasure pavilion? His status shouldn't be low, right? Yet, he was so polite to Lu Yu. It wasn't just polite, it was extremely eager. Those who didn't know would think that you were his master. Chu Luyue smiled and knocked her forehead. Don't talk nonsense. It's not good for Lord Ming to hear. It's only because they chose me to help copy the Xian formation, so we're closer. Mu Hongyu stuck out her tongue. Then they have good taste, choosing you immediately. However, I wonder who the backer of this treasure pavilion is? In the Illusion God Palace, who has a more honorable identity than the divine envoys? A light suddenly flashed in Chu Luyue's mind. To be able to make the divine envoys so afraid, wasn't it only the rumored emperor? Fengming Mountain. Dumpling stood at the top of the mountain. Her grape-like eyes were tightly shut, and her thick and long eyelashes were trembling slightly. A breeze blew over, rolling up the corners of her skirt. The golden bell on her head jingled. Under her feet, boundless and surging power was continuously pouring into her body. The aura around her was also rising. The totem between her eyebrows was faintly discernible. In front of her, the two-tian baby was also quietly growing. Unknowingly, another tender leaf had grown out, swaying with the wind. After an unknown period of time, Dumpling finally opened her eyes and let out a long breath. Her eyes were extremely bright, and in that instant, it was as if there were flames burning in them. After a while, they finally calmed down. Then, she stretched out her small hand, tidied up her skirt, and muttered softly. It's all messed up. Just at this moment, a rustling sound suddenly came from afar. She inadvertently raised her eyes to take a look and was instantly shocked. A blurry figure quickly flashed past her eyes. That was Chapter 2283. Dumpling suddenly widened her eyes. She quickly took 2 steps forward, wanting to take a closer look, but the shadow had already disappeared from her line of sight. There was nothing in the air, as if nothing had ever appeared. Dumpling rubbed her eyes. Did I see wrongly? Why did she feel like she had seen it just now, but that was impossible. She frowned deeply. No matter how she thought about it, she felt that something was wrong. Let's wait for Yu to come over and ask. She nodded thoughtfully. Whoosh, the sound of energy surging came from the side. She turned her head to look. The two-tian baby that she had buried earlier was gently shaking a few tender leaves. Although it was very small, it could still easily mobilize the surrounding heaven and earth energy. Perhaps it was because of this thing, she felt that the desolate and lonely aura of Feng Ming Mountain had lessened a lot. She walked over and gently touched it with her small hand. You have to grow up quickly. This place is so bare and looks so ugly. The two Tian babies shook gently. The clouds moved with the wind. Treasure Pavilion. After about 15 minutes, Ming Shu came down from the second floor, holding an ebony box in his hands. He came in front of the two of them and presented the ebony box with both hands. He smiled and said, "Miss Shengwan, Miss Mu, I'm sorry. This thing has been here for many years. It took me some effort to find it, so I'm late. Please take a look." Chu Liuyue's lips curved up. "Lord Ming, you're too polite. We have a favor to ask of you. We should be the ones thanking you." As she spoke, she raised her chin at Hong Yu. "Hong Yu, I don't know much about this thing. You should take a look." Mu Hongyu tried her best to suppress the excitement and curiosity in her heart as she took the ebony box. The box was not locked and could be opened directly. There was a book inside. Mu Hongyu took the book out and opened it. Her almond-shaped eyes instantly lit up. This is indeed a Mahayana cultivation technique. She looked at Chu Luyue and could no longer hide the smile on her face. Chu Luyue also laughed. The precious treasure pavilion was really amazing. They actually had. She looked at Zheng and asked, "Lord Ming, may I know the price of this book?" Before he could finish, Yu waved his hand with a smile. "Miss Shengwan, Miss Mu, take this as a free gift from the treasure pavilion to the two of you." Chu Luyue and Mu Hongyu were both stunned. "Free gift? Lord Ming, I'm afraid this isn't appropriate," Chu Luyue said hesitantly. One didn't need to think to know how precious this book was. The treasure pavilion actually gave it away just like that. No matter how generous he was, he shouldn't have come here like this, right? Mu Hongyu was also stunned. "This shop is so lavish," he explained with a smile. "The two of you may not know this, but the illusory god palace hasn't had an incorporeal body for more than 1,000 years. Even if we go back 10,000 years, there were only 3. However, those 3 people passed away before they could reach the initial realization realm. Miss Mu, if I'm not wrong, you just reached the initial realization realm, right?" Mu Hongyu nodded. "That's it. Miss Mu, you came from the Divine Ruins world and have already reached the initial realization realm at such a young age. Your future is almost limitless. It's only a matter of time before you reach the Mahayana realm. This thing is useless in our precious treasure pavilion. It's just going to be shelved and gather dust for no reason. However, if it's given to Miss Mu, it will be of great use." There was undisguised admiration in Ming Shu's eyes. "Take this book as a gift from the treasure pavilion to you. Please don't stand on ceremony, Miss Mu." Mu Hongyu blinked. Was this because they were interested in her talent, so they were giving her this book as a sign of goodwill? But this was too precious. She instinctively looked at Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue pondered for a moment. The treasure pavilion's intention could not be more obvious, and it was reasonable. However, even if they thought highly of Mu Hongyu, it seemed a little overboard to give her a Mahayana realm cultivation art like this. As if seeing the two's hesitation, Ming Shu stroked his beard and smiled. "Actually, the two of you don't have to be so troubled. The incorporeal body was an extremely rare cultivation body. Its cultivation method was poles apart from that of ordinary cultivators. Even if this book fell into their hands, they would not be able to understand it. To most people, this was not a treasure, but a meaningless book. Now that Miss Mu had this talent, they naturally could not waste it. In short, it was just a favor at no cost." Hearing him say this, Chu Luyue could not refuse. After all, this was the purpose of their visit. "In that case, thank you, Lord Ming." Mu Hongyu immediately smiled. "Thank you, Lord Ming." Ming Shu chuckled. "It's a small matter, not worth mentioning. I hope Miss Mu can successfully break through to the Mahayana realm as soon as possible." Chu Luiyue turned to look at Mu Hongyu. "Hongyu, you go back first. There are still some Xian formations here that have not been copied. This could be considered a return gift to the treasure pavilion." Mu Hongyu responded and quickly left. Chu Luiyue then went up to the second floor. She had already deciphered all the Grand Xian King Master's Xian formations on the star path, and now only the Great Grandmaster's part was left. Chu Luiyue stayed in the room on the second floor for a long time. Not only did she copy all the Grand Xian King Master's Xian formations on the mythical flame diagram, she also tried to practice with a few Great Grandmaster's Xian formations. Although the difficulty had increased by a lot, everything was still going smoothly. It was just that it consumed a lot of time and energy. These were all small problems for the current Chu Luiyue. After she was done, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes to rest. Everything that happened just now was still replaying in her mind. The corners of her lips curled up. Now, she really wanted to meet the second master of the treasure pavilion, as well as the rumored first master. Mingshu's explanation just now did not sound wrong, but after thinking about it carefully, Chu Luiyue realized that there was actually a huge logical problem. It was understandable that the treasure pavilion wanted to rope in a genius like Mu Hongyu, who had the intangible body. But the key was, they did not have to do so. Yes, the intangible body was very rare, but Mu Hongyu was still in the initial realization realm. It was still uncertain whether she could break through to the Mahayana realm. Even if she really did break through to the Mahayana realm, the treasure pavilion did not seem to need to curry favor with her. After all, even the divine envoys had to be polite to them. The treasure pavilion, who had a powerful backer, did not need to curry favor with anyone. Suddenly, the sound of a door opening came from outside. Chu Luiyue stood up and walked outside. She was very fast. When she came out, she saw Mingshu walking out of a room at the end of the corridor. Through the half-open door, a figure was faintly discernible. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes slightly. Chapter 2284. Why does this figure look so familiar? Mingshu looked up and saw that Chu Luiyue had unknowingly walked out of the room. At this point, she was half leaning against the door frame with her arms crossed as she lazily looked over. His heart skipped a beat and he quickly turned to close the door. He then looked at Chu Luiyue again and laughed. "Miss Shengguan, why did you come out so early?" As he asked, Zhao was secretly shocked. Madame's strength seemed to have improved again. When she came out just now, he didn't notice at all. If he had known that he would bump into her when he came out, he would have been more careful. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly and asked, "Nothing. It's just that I'm almost done copying the Xian formation this time and was about to go back. But I didn't see Madame Zhao, so I came out to take a look." Her gaze fell on the closed door behind Zhao. The person inside, is second master? Mingshu couldn't deny it. Miss Shengguan is indeed intelligent. At this time, there weren't many people who could go up to the second floor. Zhao looked rather respectful when he came out. That person's identity was naturally clear. Chu Luiyue stepped forward and said, "Since it's such a coincidence today, then. Second master, do you have time to meet me?" Her voice rose slightly. Although she was looking at Zhao, she was obviously talking to the person inside. When Yan Gu heard this from inside the room, his heart thumped wildly. He anxiously looked around for a suitable place to hide. Should he just run away? How did she see him? Logically speaking, she shouldn't be able to see anything with just one glance. But Madame had always been sharp-eyed and was very familiar with him. If she really saw something, Yan Gu secretly regretted it. Why did she call Zhao over at this time? It wouldn't be too late to talk about many things after Madame left. Just as he was panicking, Mingshu's voice came from outside. This. Miss Shengwan, our second master's health. Second master hasn't recovered yet? Yes, second master is not very well now. He probably can't see you. Chu Luiyue smiled. Isn't this a coincidence? I've just broken through to become a senior doctor some time ago, so I'm just in time to take the second master's pulse. Zhenbao Pavilion has helped me so much, I've always felt very apologetic. If he could do something for the second master, it would be great. Mingshu paused and spoke hesitantly. Miss Shengwan, we appreciate your kindness, but second master has an old illness. I've already asked the medical sage to come over and take a look at him. There's no big problem, he just needs to rest well. You've just finished copying those profound formations, and I reckon that it's time for you to rest. How can I trouble you? Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Mingshu quietly. That pair of clear starry eyes carried a hint of scrutiny. Previously, she was only curious about this second master, but now, it had turned into suspicion. She just wanted to see him. Why was it so difficult? Judging from Zhenbao Pavilion's attitude, this second master definitely didn't hate her. Otherwise, he wouldn't help her like this. But he just didn't want to see her. The reason he gave really couldn't convince her. Moreover, that back view just now was indeed very familiar to her. Being stared at by her indifferent expression, Mingshu only felt his whole body tense up, and cold sweat kept breaking out on his back. After a long time, Chu Luiyue smiled and said, since it's still inconvenient for second master, then forget it. Mingshu heaved a long sigh of relief in his heart. Thank you for your understanding, Miss Shengwan. If there's a chance in the future, second master will definitely treat you well. Chu Luiyue looked up slightly and said to the closed door, second master, just take care of yourself. I won't disturb you today. After saying that, she turned and went downstairs. Mingshu hurriedly went to send her off. Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks and looked back with a smile. Lord Mingshu, you don't have to send me off. If you have the time and energy, you'd better take care of second master. It's not good to keep resting like this, right? Mingshu smiled awkwardly and could only stop and watch her leave. Chu Luiyue walked out of the treasure pavilion and looked back. The doors and windows on the second floor were tightly shut, and there was no movement at all. She curled the corners of her lips thoughtfully. Even if she didn't see him today, she would see him sooner or later. She wanted to see how long this second master was going to hide. Putting away her thoughts, she lifted her feet and walked in the direction of Fengming Mountain. The surroundings of the illusory god palace were always deserted, and it was the same today. Chu Luiyue came to the front of the barrier, took out the jade tablet that Yu Qian had given her, and placed it on the barrier. Wang, the barrier opened. She stepped in without hesitation. When she arrived at Fengming Mountain, Dumpling was sitting on the top of the mountain, holding her chin with one hand. Her cheeks were bulging, as if she was thinking about something. Dumpling. Chu Luiyue called out. Hearing the voice, Dumpling immediately looked up, and a big smile blossomed on her cute face. She quickly got up and ran over barefooted with her short legs. You're here. As soon as Chu Luiyue landed, Dumpling had already pounced on her. Her two hands were tightly wrapped around her neck, and her small head kept rubbing against her shoulder as she took a deep breath. You smell so good. She hadn't smelled this smell for a day and a night. Whoa. Chu Luiyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at her jubilant appearance, she felt her heart ache. Dumpling had always liked to be lively. Staying here alone would indeed be very uncomfortable for her. You also missed Dumpling very much, so she came over today. As she spoke, Chu Luiyue kissed her chubby little face. Dumpling, how do you feel being here by yourself? The aura on your body seems to have strengthened? Chu Liuyue's face revealed a look of surprise. How long had it been, and there was already such an obvious change? Dumpling pursed her lips. It's just like that. Yu is not here, so I'm not happy. She was bored, so she could only spend most of her time on cultivation and strive to open her meridians as soon as possible. Chu Liyue sighed in her heart. Fengming Mountain is indeed extraordinary. Dumpling's cultivation on this day had almost exceeded the previous few days. More importantly, because Fengming Mountain was originally the territory of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan's ancestors, Dumpling's cultivation here was extremely efficient, and there wouldn't be any hidden dangers. This was much better than forcefully opening her meridians. If this continued, she should really be able to open her 7th meridian very quickly. Oh right, Yu, I think I saw. Tuanzi suddenly thought of something. She hesitantly bit her finger and put it close to her ear. It seems to be, boom. Before Dumpling could finish her words, a loud sound suddenly came from the palace of the illusory god. Chu Liuyue's heart tightened as she immediately looked up. Chapter 2285. Then, a reddish-gold flame suddenly soared into the sky. The aura of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix? Chu Liyue murmured in shock. Dumpling also looked over. After being stunned for a moment, her small face suddenly frowned. That's the Great Elder. Chu Liyue looked at her with some surprise. Elder Yi Gong? Dumpling, are you sure? Of course. Dumpling gritted her teeth. I definitely won't be wrong about this kind of thing. It's him. And he's still trying to open his meridians. Chu Liuyue's eyes flickered slightly. Dumpling had the purest bloodline and was already the young master. She knew the aura of all the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clansmen like the back of her hand. Of course, she wouldn't be wrong. And now, Yi Zhao was trapped in the Thunder Sea, and the rest of the clansmen were forcibly sealed in the Phoenix God Mountain by him. Only Yi Gong wasn't there. Other than him, there wouldn't be any other answer. So he's in the illusory God Palace. Chu Liyue had long suspected that there was something wrong with Yi Gong's disappearance. Now, it seemed that he was almost certain that he had betrayed the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Otherwise, how could he have the capital to stay in the illusory God Palace to open his meridians at this time? A powerful summoning force came. A reddish-gold light flashed in front of Dumpling. It was the ancestor's golden feather that was summoned by this force and was about to go there. Swoosh! Dumpling quickly flew out and grabbed the ancestor's golden feather back. Don't go. He wanted to open the 7th meridian. She wouldn't let him. The corner of Chu Liuyue's eyes twitched. He never thought that Dumpling would have such a move. The ancestor's golden feather struggled in Dumpling's hand for a moment, then obediently stayed there. The purest bloodline summoning force was naturally stronger for the ancestor's golden feather. Tuanzi glared at her fiercely with a pair of big, grape-like eyes. I want to see how he's going to open his meridians this time. At this moment, Yi Gong, who was at a certain area of the illusory God Palace, had finally noticed that something was off, and he suddenly opened his eyes. Something was wrong. Why hasn't Ancestor Jin Yu appeared yet? Even though this was not the divine Phoenix Mountain, he was still a crimson gold heavenly phoenix and possessed a powerful bloodline. As long as he was preparing to open his meridians, no matter where he was, Ancestor Jin Yu should have answered the summons. It seems that your talent is far inferior to hers. A gentle and deep voice came from behind. Yi Gong suddenly turned his head. The second divine envoy? Yu Qian raised his chin. Oh right, there's something I haven't told you yet. Dumpling is already at Fengming Mountain. The reason why you couldn't summon Ancestor Goldfeather should be because of her. Yi Gong was startled. Soon after, an unwillingness surged into his heart. How much had he sacrificed to open his seventh meridian? He had waited so long for this day, but it was forcefully interrupted just like that? From the second divine envoy's words, he actually admired Dumpling. Second divine envoy, although she has the purest bloodline, she broke through all the way from the nine-colored heavenly pheasant and followed Sheng Guanyu for several years. Her thoughts dash, none of this is important. Yu Qian interrupted him impatiently. She has the purest bloodline. That's enough. Something seemed to be surging in Yi Gong's chest. He felt extremely stifled. Yu Qian glanced at him. However, you don't have to care too much about this. As long as you can open your seventh meridian, what I said before still counts. Yi Gong took a deep breath. I know. It wasn't that he had no way. Because in this world, there wasn't only one ancestor golden feather. There was another one, and it was in this illusory god palace. He closed his eyes again and devoured the surrounding energy of heaven and earth in an even crazier manner. The crimson gold flames burned even more fiercely and completely surrounded him. A moment later, a buzzing sound came from somewhere in the illusory god palace. Immediately after, a crimson gold stream of light tore through the air. It was the ancestor golden feather that was used to register in the divine register. Sensing this aura approaching, Yi Gong made up his mind. This time, he had to open his seventh meridian no matter what. Ancestor golden feather. Sensing the commotion here, Dumpling immediately realized what had happened. Ah, this is their one. Chu Luyue frowned slightly. Looks like Yi Gong has made up his mind this time. Dumpling smiled coldly. He's dreaming. As soon as she finished speaking, she tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and quickly flew over. Dumpling. Chu Luyue was shocked and immediately went to pull her, but it was already too late. After Dumpling opened her sixth meridian, her strength had increased greatly. Now that she was anxious, she directly used her fastest speed. Chu Luyue followed without hesitation. Dumpling quickly arrived in front of the barrier that descended from the sky. This barrier separated Phoenix Cry Mountain from the illusory god palace. It would be extremely difficult to pass through. Yi Gong heard the commotion and looked over. He sneered with a mocking gaze. Although the two were far away, they could still sense each other's gaze and expression. Dumpling gritted her teeth. You traitor! You betrayed Grandpa Patriarch, didn't you? Yi Gong snorted coldly. He was the one who was stubborn and wanted to lead the entire clan to death. I was just making the right choice for him. Dumpling spat. Bah! Who do you think you are? Yi Gong's expression changed. No one would be in a good mood after being insulted in public like this. But soon, his expression returned to normal. TSK. The purest bloodline. Young master. How awe-inspiring. Unfortunately, you're still trapped and can't break free. Who can you care about? As he spoke, the ancestor golden feather had already flown to his glabella. 6 reddish gold lines quickly appeared. As long as he drew the 7th line, he would successfully open his 7th meridian. Dumpling clenched her fists, and reddish gold flames instantly burned in her eyes. Almost at the same time, several lines appeared on her glabella. You dare to snatch it from me? As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from Dumpling's body. The ancestor golden feather that was about to land on Yi Gong's glabella suddenly trembled. Then it turned around and flew towards Tuanzi. What? Yi Gong's expression changed and instantly turned pale. The purest bloodline could naturally snatch the ancestor golden feather. Chapter 2286. That ancestor's golden feather pierced through the air with the wind. Chi! Almost without stopping, it directly passed through the barrier in the middle and arrived in front of Dumpling in the blink of an eye. At this moment, 6 crimson gold lines had also been summoned from between her brows. The flowing light was like a burning flame. The ancestor's golden feather hung between her brows and slowly but firmly began to draw the 7th line. Dumpling. When Chu Luyue saw this scene, her heart immediately rose to her throat. Dumpling had just opened her 6th meridian not long ago. Now that she was forcefully opening her 7th meridian, it would undoubtedly have a great impact on her. It was very likely that her body would not be able to withstand the impact of this terrifying pressure and vast power. Previously, it was not easy to help Dumpling recuperate her body. Now, Chu Luyue's temples throbbed. She felt as if all the blood in her body had solidified at this moment. She wanted to step forward to stop it, but the ancestor's golden feather had already begun to carve the 7th line. If she rashly interrupted it now, the situation would not be any better. However, at this moment, Yi Gong's mood was even worse. He could have successfully opened his meridians, but now it was all ruined. Bang! He furiously swung out a wave of power. The ground beneath his feet instantly cracked open. Crimson gold flames burned along the crack, leaving behind a charred mark. However, no matter how he vented his anger, he could no longer change the fact that had already happened. Dumpling had indeed easily snatched the ancestor's golden feather from him. This was not the first time such a thing had happened, but Yi Gong had never imagined that there would be a day when it would actually happen to him. He was the first elder of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. However, when Yu Qian, who was standing not far away, saw this scene, his eyes shone as he exclaimed in amazement. The purest bloodline indeed lives up to its reputation. Dumpling and Yi Gong had both opened their 6th meridian. However, not only was Dumpling able to firmly guard her original ancestor's golden feather, she was even able to directly snatch the 2nd one from Yi Gong. Such bloodline power was completely overwhelming. If Dumpling could use this opportunity to open her 7th meridian, it would be killing several birds with one stone. At that time, would there still be a need for Yi Palace? The ancestral golden feather pattern was extremely difficult to inscribe. Although Dumpling's bloodline power was unparalleled, the power she had accumulated in her body was not enough to support the opening of her 7th meridian channel. Therefore, this process became incomparably slow and difficult. The surrounding heaven and earth energy began to crazily pour into her body. Chu Luyue's eyebrows twitched violently. She was really worried that the same thing that happened in the Red Moon Desert would happen again. But gradually, she realized that the situation was a little strange. Dumpling continued to devour the energy, but from the beginning to the end, she did not show any signs of pain. Her body was like a sponge, continuously absorbing this power, but there seemed to be no end to it. On the contrary, her aura became stronger and stronger, and her eyes became brighter and brighter. Her entire body was enveloped in pure golden flames, and the scorching heat almost set the air ablaze. Hula, the sound of surging tides could be heard. Chu Luyue turned around to look. She saw that on the top of Fengming Mountain not far away, there were clearly many 2 Tian babies swaying in the wind, sending boundless energy over. A resplendent pattern slowly appeared between Dumpling's eyebrows. Chu Luyue held her breath. Could it be, was it because this was Fengming Mountain? When she first came here, she had already noticed that the power here was different from the outside world. Dumpling especially liked it. But at that time, she did not pay too much attention to it. She only thought that it was because this was the place where the Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix ancestor had stayed. As a junior, Dumpling would behave like this. But now it seemed. Forcefully opening her meridians is just courting death. Now that she is not yet an adult and is so rash, the final result will not be any better. Yi Gong clenched his fists and said hatefully. As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a cold gaze land on him. He was shocked and turned his head to look, only to see Yu Qian looking at him coldly and mockingly. Yi Gong, although you have done a good job in reporting him, it does not mean that you can do whatever you want in the illusory God Palace. You'd better know what you can say and what you can't say. Otherwise, I think Yi Zhao would be happy for you to accompany him. Yu Qian's voice was an undisguised warning. Yi Gong choked and wanted to defend himself, but in the end, he gave up. He gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. Finally, he said, I will follow the second divine envoy's instructions. He lowered his eyes, hiding the resentment and killing intent in his eyes. So what if he didn't want him to say it? These were all facts. Just wait and see. If he forced it like this, he would only bring about his own destruction. Half of the line between Dumpling's eyebrows had finally been drawn. However, at this moment, the ancestor's golden feather suddenly stopped and did not continue. The remaining half was like a heavenly moat that was difficult to cross. Chu Luyue frowned slightly. Dumpling's face was flushed red. She clenched her fists and stared at the ancestor's golden feather in front of her. Continue. The seventh meridian was only half opened. However, no matter how she urged, the ancestor's golden feather could not continue. Because of the long pause, it even trembled faintly, as if it would fly away at any time. Seeing this scene, Chu Liyue's heart sank. This was the sign of a failed meridian opening. Suddenly stopping in the middle of opening a meridian was the worst. Because once it stopped, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens to continue opening meridian. Even if it could continue, how could she ensure that the two meridian openings were completely compatible? If it could not be done in one go, mistakes would be inevitable. Without a doubt, this would be a fatal blow. Even if Dumpling had the purest bloodline, she could not avoid this problem. Dumpling seemed to have realized the seriousness of the matter and urged the power into her body even more crazily. However, at this moment, her body had already reached its limit. She was unable to control such a terrifying force. The ancestor's golden feather began to tremble violently. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. The smile on Yu Qian's face had completely disappeared and his brows were tightly knitted. He had spent so much effort to keep Dumpling at Fengming Mountain. If he were to lose just like that, wouldn't all his efforts be for naught? Most importantly, if she was crippled, then where were they going to find another person with the purest bloodline? Seeing this, Yi Gong's lips curled into a cold smile. He had already said that this was absolutely impossible. Even if she could snatch the ancestor's golden feather away, so what? She would never be able to successfully open her meridian without any preparation. If the seventh meridian was really so easy to open, Yi Zhao wouldn't be the only one in the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan who had done it for so many years. At this moment, the ancestor's golden feather flew away. Dumpling's body trembled and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Digression, I saw the comments saying that Dumpling's real name is Yi Tuan. Chapter 2287. Dumpling. Chu Liyue's heart sank. Just as she was about to move, a black figure was faster than her. She paused. Zichen. Zichen pulled Dumpling into his arms. Then, almost without hesitation, he cut open Dumpling's palm. Chi. A dark red line of blood flew out. A drop of warm blood landed on his handsome and cold face. His expression did not change. He quickly wiped away the blood with his thumb and put it between his lips to suck on it. Then, he cut open his own palm and overlapped it with Dumpling's palm, holding it tightly. The majestic aura that almost overflowed from Dumpling's body flowed out along the blood and into Zichen's body. The blazing energy was like flowing fire, spreading through his muscles, bones, and blood vessels, burning every inch of his body. The bone-piercing, scalding pain surged from all parts of his body. He frowned slightly, but did not make the slightest sound of pain. The crazy energy was absorbed by Zichen, and Dumpling's body gradually recovered. She opened her eyes in a daze and saw a familiar face. She was stunned. Zichen. Continue to open your meridians. Zichen's voice was as cold as ever, but at this moment, it inexplicably calmed Dumpling down. I'll help you. Chu Luyue, who was standing at the side, saw Zichen's actions and finally realized what he was planning to do. She immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Zichen. Was he crazy? If Dumpling wanted to open her meridians, she had to absorb enough heaven and earth energy to temper her body. However, she had just opened her 6th meridian. Now, she did not make any preparations. It was almost equivalent to using force. Of course, her body could not bear it. Even if the energy here was extremely beneficial to her cultivation, it was still very difficult. The reason why the ancestor's golden feather was cut off just now was because Dumpling could no longer accommodate any more heaven and earth energy. If it was full, it would overflow. Just relying on herself was definitely not enough. At this moment, Zichen stepped forward and channeled all the power that Dumpling could not bear into his body through the method of merging their bloodlines. This greatly reduced the pressure on Dumpling. At the same time, he could also reorganize this energy and slowly channel it back into Dumpling's body, repeatedly tempering her body. In this way, Dumpling would be able to utilize the power to its fullest extent without exceeding the limits of what it could withstand. The only drawback was that this process would be extremely difficult for Zichen. The Yu Qian had said before that even the Crimson Gold Celestial Phoenix clansmen might not be able to withstand the power here. Let alone Zichen. However, at this time, there was no one more suitable than Zichen. Because no matter what, half of the Great Phoenix Dragon's bloodline power still flowed in his body. And this was also the foundation of how he could help Dumpling. If it were any other divine beast, they would have already exploded and died. So, it had to be Zichen. Dumpling also immediately understood this point and suddenly widened her eyes. But, Zichen held her hand tightly. Compared to his broad and well-defined palm, Dumpling's fleshy little hand was especially small. When their palms touched, there was a faint smell of blood. Dumpling gritted her teeth and nodded seriously. Okay. Since they had already reached this step, they had to succeed no matter what. She closed her eyes and held her breath. The ancestor, Goldfeather, who had just flown away, had already reached the edge of the barrier. Sensing the movement on Dumpling's side, it swayed a few times and finally flew back again. More and more power poured into Dumpling's body. After tempering her body, it poured into Zichen's body again. After being refined by him again, it finally returned to Dumpling's side. This cycle repeated over and over again. Because of the intense pain, Zichen's body was trembling slightly. However, from the beginning to the end, he never stopped, allowing the boiling and majestic power to wrap around his body. Finally, the ancestor's golden feather arrived in front of Dumpling's glabella again. How is this possible? Everything that happened in front of him shocked Yi Gong. The corners of his eyes and the tips of his brows still had a cold and mocking smile. However, before his smile could fully spread, the situation suddenly reversed. His expression was particularly ugly. Yu Qian was also completely shocked. He originally thought that Dumpling might really not be able to make it this time, but who knew? Yi Gong took a deep breath. No problem, no problem. Even if Dumpling recalled the ancestor's golden feather again, it was impossible for her to follow the previous traces and continue to open meridians perfectly. Such a problem during meridian opening would undoubtedly affect her future cultivation. Even if she had the purest bloodline, she would definitely stop at the 7th meridian. Thinking of this, Yi Gong's mood finally improved. However, the next scene completely shocked him. Because, that ancestor's golden feather had actually opened Dumpling's meridians from the beginning. An incomparably resplendent reddish-gold pattern slowly and firmly appeared between Dumpling's glabella, easily covering half of the previous pattern. At the same time, somewhere in the illusory god palace, a shadow flew over quickly and pounced into the thick layer of fallen leaves in the cold and silent courtyard. After a moment, a low and indifferent voice came out from within. I told you long ago, now is not the time to go to Phoenix Cry Mountain. Under the piled-up fallen leaves, something surged for a moment, then quickly calmed down. A gentle breeze blew, and a few fallen leaves flew down. It was as if nothing had happened. In the depths of the lightning pool, Yi Xiao, who had been trapped for a long time, suddenly opened his eyes and looked up at a certain place. This aura, Dumpling had opened the 7th meridian. Countless emotions surged in his eyes. He lowered his head and looked at the black chains around his body, a trace of determination flashing across his eyes. Boom! A cluster of reddish-gold flames suddenly burned. Digression: the afternoon sun is so good, I want to lie down and rest. After it's over, I can enjoy an entire afternoon of sunshine. Chapter 2288. The scarlet gold flames and the golden Tianlei intertwined, creating a dazzling light that illuminated the depths of the lightning pool. The black chains were wrapped in blazing flames, and they began to tremble violently. Whoosh! The chains tightened, as if they were about to strangle Yi Xiao to death. Mu Dongyu, who was meditating nearby, noticed the commotion. She immediately opened her eyes and looked towards the direction where the flames were shooting into the sky. The power around Yi Xiao had already begun to burn wildly, and the thick smell of blood permeated the air. Mu Dongyu's heart sank, and she immediately ran in that direction. This Yi Xiao is crazy. At the same time, the cultivators in the lightning pool also sensed that something was wrong. The flickering Tianlei became inexplicably restless, and they began to wander around in a frenzy. Several cries of pain came from the lightning pool. Then, one figure after another quickly escaped and ran to the shore. The people standing on the shore were shocked by this scene, and they quickly retreated. The lightning pool is exploding. It was unknown who shouted loudly, but his voice was filled with panic. The people who escaped quickly looked battered and exhausted. Some of them couldn't dodge in time, and their bodies were covered in wounds. Blood dripped, and their flesh was mangled. Look! A man standing on a reef suddenly pointed forward. Everyone subconsciously looked in the direction he was pointing, and they all gasped in unison. Within the vast and boundless lightning pool, countless silver heavenly lightning bolts seemed to have been summoned by something and were rapidly converging towards the center of the pool. Because there were too many of them, these Tianlei collided fiercely with each other, and sparks flew everywhere. However, their speed was not affected in the slightest. It was precisely because of this that many cultivators couldn't help but be affected by the shockwaves and suffer injuries of varying degrees. How could this be? In the dead silence, someone couldn't help but mutter, his eyes full of shock. No one answered. This was a problem they had no answer to. Even though some of them had been in the illusory god palace for thousands of years, they had never seen such a scene. There are still people who haven't come out. Song Qing, who had finally escaped from the water, had just reached the shore. He looked back and said worriedly. From where they were, they could still see a few figures struggling in the lightning pool, trying to make their way over. However, at this moment, all the Tianlei cultivators were rushing towards the center. Their actions were no different from going against the flow and were extremely dangerous. One had to know that when the Tianlei was in its normal state, its destructive power was already terrifying enough. Many people had to be careful when they entered the Tianlei lake. If he was not careful, it was very likely that he would return with injuries. And now, with the Tianlei riots, the level of danger had increased by several times. Not to mention coming out unscathed, even coming out alive was a problem. Help! Sure enough, a panicked cry for help soon came from the lightning pool. The people standing on the shore looked at each other. Song Qing took a step forward hesitantly. But in the end, he looked at the injuries on his body and stopped. It wasn't easy for him to get out. If he went back, he might not be able to get out himself, let alone save people. Soon, a few waves surged over and quickly swallowed those figures. Only a few of them were still struggling. I beg you all. Help. This time, Song Qing heard it clearly. It was Cheng Pei's voice. He frowned. Ever since Cheng Pei found out that the Tianlai Lake could refine the divine body, it was as if he was addicted and came here frequently. Gradually, he was no longer satisfied with staying at the edge of the Tianlai Lake. He started to try to go in bit by bit. Even if doing so caused him to be in a sorry state and covered in injuries, compared to the power he gained, it was not worth mentioning. Song Qing had previously advised him not to do so. Although refining the divine body in the Tianlai Lake could increase one's strength quickly, the effect was limited and there were also disadvantages. Using this method once or twice was no problem, but it was too much to do it too often. If one wanted to become stronger, it was best to cultivate diligently. But why would Cheng Pei listen to him? He desperately wanted to become stronger, especially after hearing about Chu Liuyue's matters recently. The fire in his heart burned brighter and brighter, and he couldn't wait to unleash all of his potential so that he could trample on her. That was why he ignored his safety and went into the depths of the Tianlai Lake. Who knew that he would run into such a shocking change? With such a scene, those who have not come out are probably dead. The fourth divine envoy is still in the depths of the Tianlai Lake. Will he help them? I'm afraid it's hard to say. The Tianlai Lake is rioting. With such a commotion, how could the fourth divine envoy have the time and energy to care about these things? That's true. There seems to be someone over there. Is that Mitsui? It should be him, right? Hasn't he been coming here every day recently? And every time, he goes in deeper than the others. But why do I feel that the Tianlai Lake is not a threat to him? Look! He's coming here. Mitsui's name had been very famous in the Tianlai Lake recently. Not only because he came here often, but because every time he came, he would go into the depths of the Tianlai Lake and stay there for a long time. More importantly, he had never been injured even once. Everyone saw that every time he came out, he was stronger than before. Moreover, he did not seem to be in pain at all. He was always in high spirits. As time passed, people did not even have the heart to be jealous of him. Because sometimes, you can't compare yourself to a pervert. And this time, when so many cultivators were trapped in the Tianlai Lake and were tortured, facing the danger of death, he was still as calm as ever. Mitsui was originally using his small hammer to hit a rock, but halfway through, he realized that something was wrong. When he saw the Tianlai Lake around him rushing into the depths of the Tianlai Lake, his first reaction was to follow them. But when he remembered that he had been warned by the fourth divine envoy, he gave up on this idea and turned to leave. He strode through the Tianlai Lake. Countless silver Tianlai lakes surged past him, but they all tactfully avoided him. As a result, Shijing did not encounter any obstructions or threats as he smoothly made his way to the shore. Help! Help me! As he walked, he heard a cry for help. Mitsui turned his head to look. Oh, someone familiar. At this moment, Cheng Pei saw Mitsui clearly. His expression froze. However, it was only for a moment before he continued to shout. Mitsui! As long as you save me, I won't save you. Mitsui said crisply, then turned and left without any hesitation. What a joke, how Cheng Pei treated their master before, he had forgotten, but Mitsui did not forget. Save him? The fact that he didn't step forward to step on them was already a sign of his benevolence. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.